The end of the world has come. There is no network reception, and the radios don't work either. It is not clear whether their unit is still safe. How long can they stay there? So far, everything has been fine. Their unit is high in the mountains, and all around there is destruction and a wall that will now be their enclosure. Food supplies are running low, and if they want to survive, they will need to go outside the unit. The cook is preparing something. That today's soup is prepared with a special sauce. Yun Yung says this Saragompton makes everyone fearless. Several soldiers enter the dining room and take seats at the tables. The soldier asks if this is their only option, and the other guy explains that going outside is suicide. They try the Saragomptang made by Yun Jun and are surprised that it turns out delicious. One of them calls Lieutenant Kim. Meet Lieutenant Kim. He shouts and raises the spirit of the soldiers. The soldiers enthusiastically suggest going out and gutting all the monsters. Several soldiers in camouflage uniforms run forward energetically, showing determination and strength. Yun Jun stays behind to clean up the kitchen. First Corps is where soldiers train and serve. They can play football in their free time, listen to music, and eat like normal people, but it won't always be like that. The soldier says it's lunchtime, and everyone runs to fill their stomachs. Yun Jun quickly slices the carrot into many thin slices, showing off his skill. The sous chef explains that there is fried calamari for dinner tonight, but he can't find it. Yun Jun says he asked her to check the grocery list several times. The assistant tells Sergeant Shin that Lieutenant Kim called and said he would not eat fried vegetables. Yun Jun is angry but still says that they will redo the food. There's no squid for dinner, and Lieutenant Kim won't eat vegetables, so the situation is complicated. Yun Jun decides to make fried pork belly instead of fried squid. They say that we need to hurry and that everyone will be happy with fried bacon. They say the lieutenant loves noodles, so they'll cook them with sauce and chicken for lunch. First Corps. A torn paper bag lies on the ground. A sneaker lies nearby with blood stains visible around it. There are a man's legs lying on the ground and blood splashes are visible nearby. It looks like some kind of animal attacked the soldier. But it turned out to be a monster. The man says that there is very little time left until demobilization and he has worked hard, and Yun Jong is surprised. The man says that everything is so, and the other Yun Jong explains that he is not leaving yet, but the other one has already started. The man asks what Yun Jun intends to do next, and the boy explains that he was thinking of studying and opening his own restaurant. A man says the restaurant industry is no worse than the army and is surprised that his interlocutor is only a cook. Yun Jun says that being a chef is definitely rewarding and that he is proud that people say they love his food. A man invites Yun Jun to go to the restaurant where he worked. Yun Jun explains that he won't even think about it, calling the other man a fool and saying he's crazy, while the other man says that Japanese food is good. Yun Jun says the army is no worse than the restaurant industry and that he doesn't want to walk under him. Yun Jong says that they are out of salt and orders them to go to the warehouse. The guy shouts that it's time to work and clean up. Yun Jun says he doesn't want to become magne. Magne means newbie, and he says that Western cuisine is much more profitable and objects. There is a loud knock on the door and someone scream. Yun Yung runs out of the room, throwing down his hat and towel, and asks what happened. He then peeks out from behind the wall with a worried look. He calls out to Jun Hyuk in fear. He is shocked by what he saw. There is something visible behind the table. The monster attacked Jun Hyuk and killed him. Yun Jun's hand is shaking and he is frozen in fear. He is surprised and says that this is nonsense and asks why Jun Hyuk. Blood spatters everywhere. He realizes that this is not a dream, but reality. First of all, he wants to save the younger ones. They are surprised to see what is happening, but Yun Jun tells them to leave. A guy walks into a room with a monster and asks Sergeant Shin what the sound is. He doesn't notice the monster and goes inside. The monster notices him and wants to attack. The monster caught him and is going to kill him. But Yun Jun runs towards the monster and grabs a knife, and throws these knives to the monster. The monster fights off the knives. The knives fell far from Yun Jun. The monster throws the guy and he hits the closet. The monster growls and is about to attack him. He screams in fear to get the monster to pay attention to him. The monster is heading towards Yunjun. He jumps towards him and wants to bite. Yunyung dodges the monster's attack and goes into them. He wonders how such a monster can be real. The monster loses its balance and hits the wall. The monster suddenly jumps across the table and wants to attack the sitting guy. But Yunyung tries his best to attract the monster's attention. The monster attacks by swinging its claws. Jung stumbles. But at that moment another guy picks up some hot oil and is preparing to attack. The man yells "duck" and pours hot oil on the monster. The monster takes damage and moves away from Yunyung, still collecting oil, and pours it on the monster. The monster roars in pain. Yunyung shouts that the scalding hot oil will not leave anyone unharmed, even if their skin is thick, and says that they need to tell everyone what happened here. Yongjung calls his junior, and at that moment the monster attacks him with its tail. The younger one immediately switched off. Yunjun looks at this in shock, and he can't believe what's happening. The scream is heard simultaneously with the destruction of the concrete structure. The monster starts to lash its tail around. There is a scream and a loud bang is heard. The monster went mad. Yunyung is afraid that he will die like this too, like Jun Hyuk and Junior. The monster continues to finish off those lying down. Something happened. His scales turned red and split. The skin underneath was exposed. Yunjun has an idea and it might work. He needs something that will go deep. This is Jun Hyuk's favorite knife. The monster doesn't notice Yunjun. Yunjun says that if he makes a sound, he's finished. He is gathering his resolve. The sound of breaking glass is heard and the monster reacts to it. Yunjun grabs a knife, and he jumped towards the monster. He plunged this knife into his skin, and he allowed the monster. The monster screams in pain. Yunjong launches a series of attacks. The monster loses a lot of blood and takes a lot of damage from this. Yunjun is so angry that he can't stop attacking, and he stabs again and again. Yunjun serves from fatigue and shouts that he won. He killed the monster single-handedly. A window appears stating that Shin Yunjun, a level 1 novice chef, has awakened. His stats are listed: Strength 9, Dexterity 10, Magic 8, Luck 9, and his talents include Basic Dagger Mastery, Basic Cooking Skill, and Basic Ingredient Recognition. It is reported that the awakening of a unique talent has been discovered and that the talent is a large-scale cooking. The sounds of footsteps and knocking can be heard in the background of the building. The man says there are quite a lot of monsters here and explains that he sees corpses everywhere. The man wonders if everyone is dead. Yunjong found himself under a tree. He says what kind of creature it is and what are the mysterious pop-up windows. A world event occurs, a faction war begins, and it is said that together they will stand. He explains that you can create your own faction or join someone else's, and explains that the first faction will receive special bonuses. And he wonders what kind of hologram it is and explains that it looks like a system window in some game, and asks who does this. He wonders what this faction war and capture the flag is all about. He says he doesn't know anything and explains that he's too busy to worry about that shit because he needs to get out of here first. First he will find survivors, because together it will be safer. He took the knife with him. He says that he needs to survive somehow and explains that he will look around here even if he doesn't find anything. He ran towards the warehouse. The guy says he's getting close. It is said that those who did not dare to fight the monster took out their guns and ran for supplies. Yunjun is surprised that there is still hope. His monster finds him. He's going to pounce on him. He doesn't even have oil to open the skin. Yunjun watches a holographic screen that says the ingredients are being analyzed. An image with an analysis of the monster appears on the screen. He is surprised to receive the initial culinary secret of education on caring for lizards. The lizard's joints are flexible and soft to allow for easy movement. Anyone with at least some skills can handle this ingredient without much difficulty. It is explained that, first, it is crucial to close the airway and completely drain the blood from the body. It is explained that the left armpit, close to the heart, can be easily punctured, allowing blood to be easily extracted from nearby vessels. Yun-yung is surprised that he came up with the method of cooking a monster in his head. He notices the creature approaching, and he asks if everything will go as he imagines, and doubts whether such a method can be true. But he has no time to think when a monster attacks him. He examines the monster to make a precise strike. The monster screams. He strikes the monster and a message appears saying that the basic dagger mastery skill has been unlocked. The skill improves with the use of blade-like weapons. Yun-jong is surprised that the blade didn't get stuck in the enemy's thick skin. The monster takes a lot of damage. If Yun-jung does as written, he might succeed. He stood up to the monster and killed it. He explains that if it weren't for the message, he could have died. He wonders what this feeling is and says that it is as if something is slowly filling him from the inside. He feels something like this for the first time. A bright flash appears and it is reported that he has received experience points. A man reacts to a holographic screen that appears. The text explains that the great chef has control over all ingredients and that it doesn't matter whether they exist or not. It is explained that for the purposes defined as ingredients, Yun-jun doesn't understand what's happening. He is surprised that the monster is considered an edible ingredient. A sign showing lizard cooking education is displayed. The man says that lizard meat is characterized by a light and spicy taste, but if it is overcooked, it becomes tough, and if the playful smell is not removed, the meat begins to require special attention and caution. He, tired of everything, closes the panel with inscriptions. He can't believe this happened and explains that he must do something immediately. While he was resting, someone came for him. The man with the gun shouts who is there and Yun-jung answers him. Yun-jung says he is Sergeant Shin. The corporal asks what he is doing here alone. The corporal asks what happened to him, and Yun-jun explains that it's a long story and asks how he ended up here. The man explains that he heard human voices in that direction and thought there might be survivors here. Then he says that they should head towards the ammunition depot, since they don't know when the monsters will appear again. The man in uniform says he can't afford to relax because he has a duty. Yun-jung explains he doesn't intend to harm him. They back towards the warehouse. The man asks where the other chefs are. Yun-jun explains that they are all dead and apologizes. The man says he has nothing to apologize for. Yun-jun explains that they were good guys. He remembers them and thinks that he is left alone. The man says they have a survivor and that they need to get in quickly. He says they have strengthened the defenses around the ammunition depot, and that everyone looks exhausted and notices that they have different uniforms. The guy says that at least they are all gathered here and that is a big relief. The explosion sound is accompanied by a message about receiving primate cooking enlightenment and a beginner's secret to cooking primates. He is surprised by this. The man orders the sergeant to go and report. Yun-jung realizes that the others cannot see the window. The man says that Lieutenant Kim is in charge now and explains that senior officers from each department have gathered. A man in camouflage explains that immediately after entering you need to turn left. There is a door there. The man explains that Lieutenant Kim is the only officer left. The guy says it's time to go in. They told him that they were waiting for him. The guy with the blue beret says Shin Young-jun survived. Lieutenant Kim Hyun-suk says they appear to be in big trouble. A man in uniform says let's sit down and talk, and another man in uniform explains that you can sit wherever you want. The man says that it's good and that there are still a decent number of survivors. The man with the notepad says to go back to the list and clarifies that they have settled on the transport team. The man says Lieutenant Kim. The man explains that he is a dirty, greedy, low-level officer. The man in camouflage says he'll eat something else later and expresses disgust at the way it's eaten. The boy listens to him. The man asks to cook pasta quickly, and the guy is surprised that at such an hour. The man says he can't give up so easily and explains that if he doesn't, he will die. A man explains that Sun Ho is here from the transport team, and that they seem to have a commander named Jong Hai. Another man explains that Sergeant Kim Jong Hai is dead, and a third man explains that he went into the beam. The man is surprised that it is the head of the transport team, and the other two men are silent. Yun-jun explains that he can't afford to be weak because it's dangerous. The man explains that Sergeant Park isn't in the best of health right now, so he's here in his place. The man with gray hair is surprised and asks what's wrong. The man with brown hair explains that only those who are still sane are here. The man says there are only 7 left from the intelligence unit. The man explains that there are about 10 tailors. According to rough estimates, they have about 100 people, and losses amount to almost half of the battalion. The guy is surprised. The man asks Min Jae what it is. Sergeant Min Jae explains that he checked with his superiors before the meeting and that it seems they are cut off from the rest of the world. The guy explains that all regular phones don't have a signal. The man explains that TV, radio, internet, and even military frequencies are turned off. The guy says they're screwed. The guy says North Korea launched an EMP or something, and the man asks if that means they can't communicate with the outside world. A man explains that the military has EMP shields, and another man is surprised, asking what the hell then. The guy shouts that they will all die here, and another guy explains that if they don't contact the outside world, what will happen to their families. The guy asks Kim what they should do now, and Kim explains that he feels trapped in his unit. The man explains that everyone is overcome with anxiety. The man explains that when a clear target appears, the soldiers will calm down a little. The man says the commander is able to calm down any unrest and calmly give orders. The man shouts that even the lieutenant doesn't know what they can do. The voice says that a lieutenant shouldn't be saying that in a situation like this, and asks if there shouldn't be a regulation for that. Yeon asks everyone to calm down. The man says they lost contact. The man suggests sending a couple of soldiers to contact higher-ups and explains that they need orders from their superiors before doing anything. The man with short dark hair says ellipsis. The man with red hair and the man with short blonde hair look tense. The man is surprised. Yeon explains that they are high in the mountains 1,400 meters above sea level, and even if they were to go there, the journey would take too long. He explains that it will take them 2 hours to reach them, and at the same time if a monster attacks. The guy with short hair says it's too far and suggests they stay here. The man is surprised that this bastard has gone crazy. The man in camouflage says that we need to select volunteers and go, and the guy in dark clothes says that although it is dangerous, it is necessary. The man is surprised and asks if they are volunteers, and Yeon explains that he is going to fight his way through. The man says that the other person doesn't want to command because if he makes a mistake in such a situation, he will have to bear the consequences, and tries to avoid responsibility by saying that he needs orders from his superiors. The man says he expected more from Lieutenant Kim and calls him an idiot. The man says to suggest a better idea if anyone is against it, and if not, then go look for volunteers. The other man remains silent. The guy on the right says they have alternatives. The guy on the left confirms this. The man says that everything is fine and apparently unanimous. The guy in the military uniform is silent. Yeon is silent. The man says that they need to check the status of the troops and asks Yeon how much food they have left. The man explains that the supply is designed for about 5 days of normal food and 6 weeks of emergency food, and given the current composition, they have about 2 months. A man asks what's up with the ammunition, and another man explains that all the training ammunition was used last week. So all that's left is combat kits, of which there are plenty, but no additional supplies. The man says that they are still monsters. The man says that after this, heated discussions began about how to deal with the remaining monsters at the base. A man talks about electricity and water. Yeon explains that the goal of contacting the authorities was approved. The man says that's basically it. A man in a military uniform tells him to go and tell the others. The guy is surprised. The guy is screaming that he wasn't told the most important thing. The guy says they won't discuss awakening. The man asks again about awakening and explains that Sergeant Shin isn't clear what he's talking about. A man is surprised they didn't say everyone was hunting monsters, and another man explains that they are going to. The guy is silent and then asks what kind of reaction this is. A man with a knife says he needs to show something. The other man is surprised. The guy yells that he's not going to do something, and the man asks what he's going to do. The man says he can say whatever he wants, but others will just think he's crazy. He explains he killed the monsters. The man explains it's just a wooden table. The guy makes a series of quick strikes with his sword on a wooden surface. The man shouts that he is. The man is surprised. A man says the table feels like it cut paper, and another man wonders how he did it. The man explains that after killing the monsters that infiltrated the kitchen, he awakened and was able to do such things. He explains that his talent is basic dagger mastery. The man screams that he killed the monster and woke up. The guy on the right says he believed it. The man asks if they didn't see it with their own eyes. The man says you never know when you might run out of food and ammunition. The man says he only had 3 days left before his vacation, and now he's just going to die here. The man says that in order to survive he needs to feed everyone, and then explains that their priority is. It is reported that the world event is a faction war in progress, and together they will survive. It is proposed to create your own faction or join someone else's, and the first faction will receive special bonuses. 2 men in military uniforms are surprised, and Yeonjun reacts tensely to the loud sound. The man says they have problems and monsters are approaching. A man asks how many there are, and another man explains that there are at least 5, but they are not sure. The man orders them to get to work and return to their positions. Prepared for battle, the soldiers respond that they understand. The guy shouts that he doesn't understand why they are pushing so hard. The soldier orders to open fire, after which the soldiers begin shooting at the monster. The monster screams and spits fire. The man says it feels like each person uses up a whole magazine and asks everyone to try to save bullets as much as possible. The monster is shot. It is explained that at least gunshots work on them. The guy says that it takes 20 to 30 shots to kill one monster, and explains that there is no chance that they will have enough ammo after the 10 that attacked today. The man says they said they would hold out for now. The man says that everything ended cleanly, then explains to check the perimeter for damage, as well as to count the people and report back. The man says the devil. The guy asks what they will do with their bodies. The man explains that they have set up a cemetery behind the unit and most of the bodies are put in bags and buried. A man orders a drink. Another man replies that he understands. Yeonjun looks on in surprise. The man says that the plans approved at the meeting began to be implemented, and that is how the battle with the monsters ended. The man asks if they're both sure they want to go. The text message explains that they should first submit a support request to a higher-level department and wait for a response. The man says he knows where they can safely wait out the storm if something happens, and explains that they have enough fuel, provided they don't encounter any monsters. A man in military uniform explains that they have stocked up on ammunition, and Yeonjun explains that he will provide cover so that they can withdraw the next batch of troops. The man says that now we need to think about how to increase the number of awakened people. The boy asks why they can't achieve awakening, and the man explains that he is sure that he killed the monster. The man says it might be because he killed him with a gun, and then expresses surprise that this is not possible. It is revealed that he is Intelligence Sergeant Shin Yeonjun. The man says he probably said he killed the monster himself. The man explains that they shot the monster from a distance so he couldn't get close. The man says that this is the only difference, and Yeonjun explains that he thinks so too. He explains that there must have been some energy inside when he was killed. The man explains that perhaps monsters release energy when they die, and you need to be nearby to absorb it. He explains that this is probably the case. The man asks if you need to confront the monster face to face. A man says the message revealed a weak spot, the armpit. Another man explains that the knife penetrated well there. The first man explains that the other man didn't know about the weakness before waking up. The second man says he poured hot oil on his armpit and skin showed. The guy says he used it. The man explains it's just hot oil. A man in camouflage explains that in any case you need to get very close, and another man in camouflage says that it is suicide. The man says that they can be easily killed with a few bullets, and explains that if you see that it is suffering and weakening, then let's do it this way. The voice explains that just before the monster dies, one of them must get close and kill it, always aiming for its weak spot. The man says that then they should use a bayonet and perhaps tell the repairmen to sharpen a couple of them for them. The man explains that the blade is longer. The man explains that Taejun is a scout, so he might be weaker in a real fight. Yeonjun explains that then Taejun will take care of it and they will go eat. A man explains that it is precisely at such a time that one should eat well, and another man is surprised that it is precisely at such a time. The guy on the right explains that he's not sure about it right now, but he'll be hungry soon, while the guy on the left says he doesn't think so. The guy says that lunch is over and he needs to prepare dinner, and the man asks the captain if it is possible. The man says they need to eat if they want to fight and that he has singled out 2 soldiers. The man explains that they will then sit down at 7 p.m. and eat in turns, and in the meantime they will tell everyone about the awakening. The car drives along a dirt road surrounded by trees and bushes. The man says the entire cooking process feels like relaxation, not work. The guy explains that this is the effect of the talent of the initial cooking skill, and says that he thought about how to cook everything alone, but in the end there are no problems. Rookie chef's deep-fried pork belly is ready. Superior temperature control increases chef's performance. The man explains that the chef's sensitivity has increased to medium, and the culinary characteristics have improved slightly. The man is concentrating on stirring the contents of a large saucepan. A man explains that eating a rookie chef's deep-fried pork belly will increase strength and agility by 1 for a moderate amount of time. The man is surprised that eating it will also increase his stats for a certain amount of time. The chef's special sauce skill can be used to alter the emotions of those who eat the food, as delicious food touches people's hearts, and a good chef can control those minds. A man asks what chef's special sauce is. The guy is surprised and says that there is some strange energy in his hands. The guy says he can't believe this is happening and explains that it's too unexpected. The man explains that everyone is panicking and shaking with fear now. Yeonjun hopes this will help them feel a little calmer. Chef's special sauce, Calm Heart, has been added. It's explained that the deep-fried pork belly of a rookie chef with a calm heart can help you feel a little calmer after eating it. The guy says that now they will start eating. A man asks Sergeant Shin to give him more. A man puts food in a tray. The man is surprised. The guy says the food is delicious. The guy asks if Sergeant Shin made this all by himself, and Sergeant Shin explains that it won't make your muscles grow or give you 6-pack abs. A man in camouflage thanks Sergeant Shin for the food. The guy in uniform explains that the monsters made him upset and gave him a headache. But now that he's full, he feels much better. Another guy in uniform says he feels just as energetic. A third guy asks if he can have more. The guy says that it seems to be working after all and confirms this by saying yes, of course. The man says he is not sure about the characteristics yet, but the skill may be well suited for monitoring their condition. The guy screams that he can't believe this happened, and the other guy explains that it's not his fault. The man says they have to stick together and not give up. Yeonjun is surprised and screams. Quick footsteps are heard approaching the closed doors. The sounds of running and footsteps can be heard on the sports ground. The man says it's near the barracks. The guy says the shots stopped. Several soldiers are walking in formation with weapons in their hands. The guy in the uniform says he just came from dinner, and the guy in blue asks what's going on. Then the guy in blue explains what it is and is surprised. The guy shouts for Taejun, and he tells him that he came. The guy shouts that even Min-jae is here and asks what's going on. The man explains what's going on. The guy says that they saw a monster and chased after it, and the other guy explains that, as they were told, they need to wake up quickly. The man says that these two are already ready. The monster roars. The man in the military uniform says that they are still alive, and the guy in the blue jacket explains that yes, and a man inserts a bayonet into its sheath. A man in camouflage says he's going to stab him. The man in camouflage says to first let those who were present at the meeting wake up, and the guy asks why. The man in camouflage explains that they can't gather the entire squad for the table-cutting show every time, and Yeonjun says that they first need to show that it's not that dangerous. The scream is heard twice in a row against the night sky, a bloody bayonet sticking out nearby. A bright flash appears, accompanied by a greeting of congratulations on awakening. A man in military uniform looks at a holographic screen, which reveals that the awakened one is Lee Min-jae, a novice first-level mage with the following stats: Strength 7, Dexterity 10, Magic 15, Luck 12, and Talent. The man screams what the hell is this and asks if it's real. The man asks what he sees in front of him and is surprised that Yeon-jung actually woke up, and Yun explains that a system window popped up. The guy is screaming. The guy says it's cool and explains that the other guy was right because he feels a strange energy inside his body. The guy shouts that it's victory. A guy screams that his hands are glowing, and a man in a military uniform explains that his hands are glowing. The man in the military uniform says it's amazing, and the guy says it's awesome. A man asks Hyun what his job title is, and Hyun explains that he is a novice magician with an affinity for electricity. The man explains that his skill is called Thunderstorm. Yun asks if there are any mages there. The man reminds him that Yun was the first to awaken. The guy asks if this means his position is determined by his actual talents. The man explains that awakening can be achieved by killing the monster in close combat, and now everything is clear. He says no one believed it, but after seeing it with their own eyes, there's no denying it. The guy says he should too. The man explains he's next. Another man warns Yun to be careful. Yun says it's Sergeant Park's turn now and asks him to watch carefully. The man screams that he can't take it anymore and says he doesn't want to live anymore. The guy says, ugh, which is a bit scary, and explains that it's definitely still alive. The man is surprised that it moves. A man tells you to lie still, and another man explains that he will finish quickly. The man says that this creature cannot die and explains that it cannot die until its head is destroyed. A sudden burst of energy or light occurs, accompanied by sound effects. The boy screams and the man is amazed. The guy is screaming. A powerful explosion occurs. The scream is heard against the backdrop of rain and the night sky. The guy shouts that it's Taejun. The man in the military uniform looks ahead tensely. The monster roars as it attacks the man, who falls to the ground, covered in blood. A man shouts that it is starting to hail and makes a growling sound. The man screams and says it's a fucking monster. A growl is heard. A young man asks Yun if he needs to be rescued. The man in military uniform says he's ready to shoot and is waiting for the order. Yun orders everyone to stand still and explains that Taejun should finish him off himself. A man shouts that he must finish off his opponent, but he shouts. The man shouts that it is good. The man shouts that he will not allow the enemy to survive. The guy screams and throws a punch, causing blood to spurt out. The image shows the moment a massive, snake-like creature with red eyes and sharp teeth delivers a fatal bite, impaling its victim. Blood spurts from the wound, and a man, whose leg is visible in the frame, stands nearby. The man explains that he can't fight because he has no weapon, and says he can't even fight with his bare hands. The man says he doesn't want to die, and explains that he doesn't want to die without having accomplished anything useful. A man screams that he can't believe what's happening. Another man says the situation is getting out of control. A third man explains that something needs to be done immediately. A man screams while struggling to hold onto another man's hand. A man screams. A man screams in horror. Park Tae-jun awakens and receives the position of a novice astronomer level 1 with the following stats. Strength 5, Dexterity 9, Magic 12, Luck 20, no talents and skills, with 0 points. A man shouts that a medic needs to be called, while another explains that their medic is only a physiotherapist and can't handle such wounds. The guy is screaming. A man explains that he also had a system window pop up, and another man says that he is a good guy and that he almost had a stroke. The guy screams, glad that the man is okay, and explains that for a dying monster, his bite wasn't too strong, and his leg is still there. The man shouts for help there and orders the boys to stand guard. A group of armed men says they will return as soon as a medic arrives. Thus, the unrest ceased and Tae-jun and Min-jae became awakened. Yun explains that an army capable of fighting monsters without bullets has begun to form. Men in military uniforms listen to him. A man explains that the problem is that soldiers on the battlefield are spreading the awakening process, causing a crowd in the ammunition depot. Another man explains this to 2 interlocutors. A man in a military uniform shouts that he refuses. Yun and another man in a military uniform stand in front of him. The man shouts that he will not do this and does not intend to do this. The guy says that before this he only killed mosquitoes, and the man is surprised that he and Tae-jun weren't scared. The boy screams that he doesn't understand what's going on and explains that elders should lead by example. The guy says he still can't do it, and the man responds by exclaiming, turning to him. The guy says they have no guarantees that he won't die in the process, and that he won't go through with it because he can't. The man explains that they both could have suffered much worse. A man asks if Kwang Il-jong is a specialist from the equipment division, and another man explains that he heard that he is a real master. The man says he knows, but he is somehow too scared, and explains that he refused to climb to a height and cannot even watch horrors. Yun-jun says he doesn't want more people to give up on awakening because of this. The man says let him do what he wants. The guy with dark hair says he is confident and thanks. The man shouts that in the future he shouldn't even think about being addressed as an elder. The guy is surprised and says that just being here for a long time doesn't make him a senior. The man says they need an awakened leader now. The man says he can't believe it happened. The man says to accept it. The man is silent, then says he is right. The man explains that there is no way this guy will be able to be a frontline commander after this and says that he was famous for his qualities, but the man says he understands. The guy tells her to go already because he's unreliable, and the man objects that it can't end like this. The guy asks Min Jae to step away for a minute, and Min Jae asks what exactly. The man tells Kwang Il to return to his position for now. Kwang Il replies that he understands. The man asks the boy what he's going to do, and the boy explains that he just needs to follow him. The voice says that for the sake of the entire unit's morale, there is no way to give up. Yun-jung says that he understands his brother's anger, but he can't leave the situation like this, and the man in camouflage explains that he knows this, but doesn't understand what else he can do. The man explains that it's not just one person, but that it will affect the entire battalion. The man asks what. Yun-jung explains that right now a fair number of guys are probably thinking about deserting, and adds that there are monsters all around. That's to be expected. He explains that enough time has passed since that incident to be able to say that some are already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The man says that they are in the middle of the mountains, and the descent will take at least an hour, and besides, he explains that they have a better chance against the monsters if they are in groups. The man says that no one has escaped yet, but at the same time, people want to leave to find out if their families are alive. The man says it sounds logical. The man says that if they want to survive, they must make their troops stronger, and then they will not think of running away because they will feel safe here. The man explains that this is, of course, yes, but there is something more important, and that it is not only Kwang Il who is afraid. The man explains that everything is correct, and if even one manages to remain unpunished, there will be crowds of children whining that they cannot do it, and a conflict with the awakened may arise. The man in camouflage says that everything is so difficult, and Yun-jun explains that this kind of disagreement will eventually lead to division and weaken the unit. The man says that he means that. The guy says that refusal is not acceptable for awakening. The man says that it is understandable since there is no way to persuade them. The man says that being disrespected is already humiliating enough, but it won't be enough. The man explains that he's already thought of something and asks for some time. The man in camouflage asks if the other man really thinks it's possible, and Yun-jun explains that he sees his determination, but it won't be easy. The man is silent. The guy says that if he had another position, he would just run away. The man explains that he is a first-level chef. The guy says he needs to cook better to maximize his skills. Men in military uniform walk past the building. The man explains that he doesn't want the unit to be hopeless, so he will make it stronger. The man explains that he will be cooking today. The man says he will turn Kwang Il into a real soldier. Garlic pieces are frying in a frying pan. A man picks up an onion. A man quickly cuts with knives. A powerful explosion or impact occurs, accompanied by bright flashes and flying fragments. On the stove, mushrooms and onions are fried in oil in a frying pan, the flames rising around the pan. The man explains that the quality of the main ingredient, meat, leaves much to be desired, so the characteristics of the dish will be slightly reduced, but the quality of the supporting ingredient, seasoning, is excellent, due to which the characteristics of the dish will be slightly increased. It is explained that the dish is made for specific consumers, and if the target eats the dish, its effects will be enhanced. The guy says he's finally adding the special sauce. The chef's special sauce has been added and can change the emotions of the person who eats this food. The guy says he has already eaten today. The man says he knows Kwang Il from the equipment division and asks him to come to the cafeteria. The guy says, "Here you go, your special dish." The guy asks what it is, and the man in camouflage explains that you just need to eat it. The guy says that he knows the other person is hungry and offers to eat because it's delicious. The man is silent. The man in camouflage says he will definitely eat everything. The hand grips the spoon and lifts it. The image shows a spoon with rice and vegetables. The guy says that the chicken fried rice, full of courage, is from a new chef, and explains that the strength to overcome fear is called courage. He tried to cook the best he could. The guy says it's absolutely delicious, Sergeant Shin, and explains that there are more, so don't be shy. The man says they will talk when he is full. The woman says Sergeant Shin. He replies, and she apologizes. The man says it's just so scary. The guy says he can't drink alcohol because he has to get up early tomorrow. The man explains that he can't drink either because he has to get up early tomorrow. The man says he's been like this since childhood and was always told to act like a man. The man says he was told that physical training would give him confidence, so he started doing physical training and martial arts, but it didn't help at all. The guy wonders why he's so muscular, and the man explains that it must have been hard for him with that kind of personality. The man says he really tried to do more to avoid being a burden to others. The man says he thought he was lucky because people finally accepted him, but he couldn't imagine something like this would happen. The man says that Sergeant Shin fought the monster even after he saw his comrade die at its hands, and Sergeant Shin begins to say that Yun says that if he doesn't do anything, they'll just become dinner. The red-eyed creature explains that killing his comrades brought him back to his senses. The monster explains that his body stopped responding for a moment due to the instinct of self-preservation. The man, with a tense expression on his face, explains this. The man squeezes the paper into his fist and says that he has only just begun to live and cannot just die here. A guy says he wants to open his own restaurant, and a man in a military uniform explains that he's amazing even under these circumstances. The man says it took a lot of courage and explains that his assessments and decisions have brought him this far. The man says he now wants to survive with everyone else, and the other man explains that they want the same thing. The man says it's wonderful. The guy says that after hearing the story he also wanted to try it and says that he suddenly became so bold. The man in camouflage says the food worked and his eyes lit up. The guy is surprised. The man says the next monster will be his and asks to be allowed to finish it off. The guy screams at everyone not to come and try to help him while fighting the monster. The guy says that the moment has come when he tests his courage and strikes. A man with blood on his hand smashes a stone with his fist and screams. The guy says that the monster hasn't even passed out yet, and he's already running at him with his bare hands, and he's surprised that he's gone crazy. The guy in camouflage screams that the monster must die and asks what was done to it and if Yunjun wants to stop it. The guy says he may have been a little over the top with his aggression. The man says it's better to just wait than to waste such a chance, and explains that he could get seriously hurt. The monster roars. A shadow with claws moves rapidly towards a man's raised hand. A man strikes the monster's head while dodging its kick. A man screams and punches a black, claw-like limb. The beast lets out a cry. The man shouts that he is Quan Il and calls his interlocutor a damn lizard. The guy shouts that he is stronger than this monster, and the men support him, rejoicing and raising their fists. The guy in camouflage says he can't wait to see what powers he'll have when he wakes up, and the guy in blue explains he's glad he's doing well. A man asks a sergeant for forgiveness. The man in camouflage is surprised. The man in dark clothes turns sharply. A man bites the hand of a monster, blood and sparks erupting from its mouth. The monster, with bright red eyes and sharp teeth, attacks the man, inflicting wounds. The man repels the attack by striking the monster. The image shows blood flowing from a wound on the body. A man in uniform shouts that they can't give up and says they need to fight to the end. A man in uniform, with a tense expression, explains that they mustn't retreat. Yun shouts that they must stick together and not lose hope. The guy screams that he just bit the monster on the hand and wonders what the hell he's doing. The man in the military uniform remains silent. The guy in the blue uniform with the orange collar says that maybe he added too much sauce. There is a powerful explosion, scattering debris and blood. The guy in camouflage says the monster isn't dead anymore and calls for him to be stopped, while the other guy is surprised that there's more to come. A man screams. The man yells that he's always working. The man says he's already eaten today. The man explains that he can't take it anymore. A man thrusts his hands sharply into another man's body, causing severe bleeding. The monster screams. The man says he can't believe what's happening. The guy is screaming. A man in camouflage stands in front of a dead creature with wounds and blood all around it. Several soldiers and a man in dark clothing watch the scene. The man laughs. A man tells the recruits that he, too, has awakened. The man says that he succeeded and that he is a damn madman, and also explains that this is the fourth awakening. The guy in camouflage says that this bastard is really scary, and the other guy congratulates the sergeant. A group of men praise Kwang Il for the best fist fight they've ever seen. A man screams. A man screams. The man shouts that he always works. The guy on the right explains that he can't do it because his arm hurts, and the guy on the left says that his arm hurts too and he can't help. The guy on the bottom is surprised and says they have to handle it themselves. The man in the military uniform explains what he did to him. Yunyung laughs and explains that next time he'll be more careful with the dosage. The man says what he did and explains that he is now like a different person. The guy says he just cooked food and talked to him, nothing special, and the man asks if he is that eloquent. The guy explains that this is how human hearts work. The guy asks if they just need to talk to them to make things better, and the man explains that you can't underestimate the power of support. The guy is screaming, the man is smiling. The guy is surprised that everything can't be that simple. The man says that this doesn't seem true at all. The man says it's all thanks to the effectiveness of his skills, but he can't reveal it yet. The guy explains that this is different from how he shredded the table. The man says that after what he saw today, he definitely can't call Kwang Il harmless, but it's safe to say that this change in character is only temporary. The boy explains that he can't afford to be weak because his father was always strong, and the boy explains that he has to be strong too to keep up with his father. The man says that this gentle guy is just some kind of berserker, and explains that isn't it dangerous to gain strength in exchange for sanity? The boy says that survival is a good thing in a competition, and the man explains that this is true, but the man says that all the children whose turn it is to wake up need to be sent to him, and explains that it's dangerous, so they need to be fed first. The man is surprised and says that they don't need to have a lot of food left over. The man explains that most of the remaining food is canned food from an emergency supply anyway. The man says that everything else needs to be eaten as quickly as possible, and there is a decent amount left, so they need to eat a lot if they don't want everything to spoil. The man in camouflage says that he really wants to eat properly, and the guy in dark clothes makes the sound A. The man explains that emergency and field rations do not require any special preparation. The guy says it's running. The man orders him to lead him in that direction and then shouts not to miss this time. The monster says that this is not without exceptions. The guy screams that he wants to know who just killed him and apologizes. The guy screams that they fucked up again. The man screams. The guy in camouflage is screaming. The guy in dark clothes is explaining that it's not going quite smoothly. The soldier says the biggest problem is that getting close enough to the monster for someone to deliver the finishing blow has proven difficult. The monster roars and attacks the soldier, who falls backward. The man says they're too persistent. The men shoot at the creature on the road. The monster says that awakenings must be done safely, and Yunjun explains that they cannot rush. The sounds of gunfire can be heard against the backdrop of mountains and sky. A guy yells at the sergeant to pay attention there, and another guy asks if it really worked and says that at least someone has enough brains to do this. On the ground, covered in blood, lies a wounded creature with white hair and claws, leaning on its hands and knees among the bushes. The guy in camouflage says that now someone has to finish him off and praises him for his excellent work. A man in camouflage reveals that he is Soo Hyuk from the transport unit. The man tells Soo Hyuk it's his turn, and Soo Hyuk replies that he understands. The man explains that you just need to aim for the armpit, and the guy says that he has practiced a lot. The man swallows. The guy screams and gets hit several times, causing blood to spurt out. A man in camouflage stabs a bloody monster with red eyes and sharp teeth with a spear. The man says he succeeded. He sees a system window in front of him and explains that his position is shooter. The guy in dark clothes says the shooter is a sniper. The soldier with red hair explains to Shik that it's the fifth one. The man is surprised and asks what is happening. The man screams, "What the hell is going on?" The man says that some strange phrase has appeared, turning to Sergeant Shin, and Sergeant Shin is surprised. A faction is being formed. The man explains that they formed a faction of 5 players, which is the minimum number. The man is surprised. The guy asks what faction means, and the text explains that the big region is the 3rd faction in the Republic of Kazakhstan. Small region explains that this is the 1st faction in RK-17. A guy is screaming. A man in a military uniform is screaming. A man in a military uniform is explaining that he doesn't understand what is being said. The guy says it's not just a hologram, but an interface that can display and interact with real-time data. He explains that this technology is used to analyze and control complex systems. The man says they succeeded in creating a faction faster than most. The man says that he will be given a special reward, a 3rd-place prize of 10 growth elixirs. It is explained that for a limited time, you will receive 500% more experience thanks to the growth elixir. The man tells them what to do now and explains that they first need to bring the awakened ones and then urgently hold a meeting. The man says that everyone should go back in. The guy says it's starting to look more and more like a game, and the man in camouflage explains that it's 10 per person. The man explains that it was this faction that seemed to have the condition of the 5 awakened ones. The guy explains that if the message is true, they can evolve faster with this elixir. The man says he's more concerned about 3rd place. He explains that if they're in 3rd place, that means there are 2 more factions, and then there are monsters outside their region, too. The man says he can't believe it happened. The man says that apparently so, and then asks what happened to their families. A man in a military uniform says that if the soldiers had it this hard, then one can imagine what it was like for the rest. Yun Yung remains silent. The man says that monsters could have taken them away long ago. The man says there's no need to be so pessimistic. The guy screams. The man explains that he's also worried about the situation there, but first they need to ensure their own safety. The man says it's true, but the guy says that they should think about their safety and focus on that for now. The man says that they will find and save their families only if they themselves survive. A man in camouflage says they have over 100 surviving fighters, but only 5 faction members, and asks if that means only the awakened ones count. A man in camouflage, sitting on a crate, explains that they need to awaken more people, but that's... The man explains that there is definitely logic in his words. The man explains that everything happened because of sudden changes in the world, and adds that if a person is not awakened, then he is not even considered a human being. The guy asks Yunjun if he said he was a marksman and explains that it must have affected his aim since he was famous for it. The guy asks what the other guy's talent is and tells him that his accuracy and strength increase when shooting. The man speaks while shooting and explains that he is worried that they will eventually run out of ammunition. The guy says there's no need to worry. The man explains that a regular soldier needs 10 shots, but he handles it in 2. The man says that this will definitely help with saving ammo, and with his abilities it will be much easier for them to deal with monsters. He says that this is exactly it, and explains that from now on the interlocutor will be responsible for pacifying others. The guy in the blue suit says that was the only good news. The soldier sitting on the box replies, "Yes, sir." The man says that thank God, they'll at least relax a little. The man explains that there are only 5 in the faction. The man says that even so, there is no time to just sit and be sad. The man says they should continue waking up the others, and the other man asks if it's his turn. The man screams that he can't and will definitely die. The narrator explains that some still refuse, trembling with fear. The guy tells him to calm down and suggests they talk over food. The man asks if it's Sergeant Shin. The man is silent. The man shouts that it's good and explains that he, too, has suddenly changed. The guy screams, the man is silent. The guy tells him to calm down and just go with him. The man asks what. The boy screams as he attacks the creature. The man asks if he's always been this reckless. The guy screams. The man is silent. The man says he needs to ask Shin Young-jun something, and Shin Young-jun explains what he's interested in. The guy asks so suddenly. The man says that the other man is hiding some kind of power that they don't know about, and explains that every time he takes the soldier away for a little talk, they come back braver and stronger. The guy says he's caught. Yun-young explains that he had to do it for the sake of battalion cohesion and that he's the only one who knows. The man asks what that means. The guy extends his hand. The man in the military uniform says he can't. The man says that luckily Min-jae understood him and focused on waking up the army, while he decided to focus on cooking. Information about the awakened Shin Young-jun appears, detailing his job, stats, talents, and abilities, as well as his point total. The man is surprised. The guy says he has 82 points and asks when that happened, then explains that he thought points were only awarded for killing monsters and cooking well. Young-jun says he thinks he can use them. The man explains that usually in games you need points to buy items in the store, and says that maybe it's the same here. The man says he'll look at the glasses store. An eyeglass shop opens. A man is surprised. The man says that's it. He explains that you can't do much with basic abilities. The man wonders why he didn't think of it before and explains that he'll look. Yun-jong chooses a battle axe for 30 points and a steel knife for 30 points. The guy explains that rye bread costs 10 points. The man explains that these are mostly items for the combat class. The guy says he only needs rye bread. The guy is surprised that this is. The guy says that a potion to increase strength, dexterity, and magic costs 1,000 points each, and a potion of a random skill costs 3,000 points, and notes that it sounds good, but they are too expensive. The man explains that he can't afford them now. The guy says he'll get back to them later, explaining that skills and stats are important, so he'll have to take them into account. Young-jun says he uses a lot of chef's special sauce and chef's eye. A man talks about his initial dagger skills. The man explains that the skill makes it easy to learn combat stances using a dagger, and explains that he recently trained with Kwang Il and was extremely pleased with the results. He explains that he hasn't tried to fight with his bare hands, much less fence, but at least he's pretty good at it. The man is silent and thinks. The man says that if this is the beginner's level, then what should a master be like? The voice explains that this is an initial predisposition to flame. The skill was developed when he accidentally grabbed a hot pot, and he can maintain a fire in his hand for 3 seconds, which could become very useful if he continues to train. Yun-young says that the most important skill has finally arrived, the basic skill of cooking, and reveals that he has been accumulating data since his conversation with Min-jae, but a man in camouflage explains that the dish tastes excellent and is unusually invigorating, and that its stats on the status bar have increased. The boy asks if this is really true. The man explains that he noticed the +3 strength bonus from the finished dish still remains. The man says that no one else seems to have noticed, and explains that it might be because the unawakened soldiers don't yet have access to the status window. The man says yes, and the other explains that the effects of food do not appear as a system message. The man says he was not told at all about the effects of eating another person, and explains that he is sure that the other person would have known about his abilities sooner if he had received a corresponding message. The man in camouflage asks how Young-jun is feeling, and Young-jun explains that his strength was at 9 and increased by 3, which on paper is only +30%, but feels much stronger. The man is silent, then says that the enhancements definitely work. If Min-jae is right, then at least in our situation the chef skills are not failing. The guy wonders what if such a boost could be applied to the entire battalion. A voice calls out to Sergeant Shin, saying they need him. The man says he's at the ammunition depot. The guy asks what's wrong. The guy says there's a new type of monster there. The voice explains that the creature is completely different from those lizards, and the creature growls. A guy greets the sergeants. The guy in camouflage says it's urgent and asks what's going on and if another monster has appeared. Yun-young remains silent. The man says that he was watching the area and noticed something he had never seen before that caught his attention. Explains that the appearance of this object is completely different from those they have seen before, and says that others will understand if they look. A man passes binoculars to another man. A man in camouflage explains that it's sitting on top of a hill, and the boy notices that he looks scared. The man wonders what kind of monster it is. The man asks Yunjun if he can see it, and Yunjun explains that it's just another ordinary lizard. He says that there is nothing in this world that cannot be bought with money. The guy screams that this is. The image shows a large stone monster with red glowing eyes, surrounded by smoke and fire. The guy shouts that he found it. The man says it moves. A man in camouflage and a guy with a flashlight hear a scream. The man is silent. The guy says it's coming this way. The man explains that this thing must be 3 meters long, and that there are also regular lizards around it. The man says he thinks it's some kind of boss. The guy in dark clothes explains that the lizards that attacked them moved in groups of 2 at most, and the man in camouflage says that this is strange. The guy says that then these came from somewhere else. The guy explains that it is quite possible that about 20 of them are following the other one, and if they attack at the same time. The man explains that they will have to use up a lot of bullets, but he doesn't think it will be a problem and says that they have Suhyuk. The hero says that the enemy has a numerical advantage, but they already know their weak points, but this time something is wrong. The guy asks when this creature appeared and how it behaved. The man explains that it was this morning at dawn. The man explains that nothing unusual happened, and that they were simply wandering around the area without showing any signs of aggression. The man in camouflage says that maybe they're afraid. Yunjung explains that he's wondering why they haven't attacked since there are so many of them. A silhouette with multiple horns and tentacles looms on the hilltop. Below, a close-up of a monster with yellow eyes, sharp white teeth, and 2 large horns radiates dark smoke and a red glow. The guy explains that they are waiting for the right moment, and the man asks what. The man says they know a frontal attack won't work, so they just hang around and watch. The guy with brown hair says that can't be true, and the guy with black hair explains that he doesn't think these monsters are that smart. Yunjung says that wolves are smart when it comes to hunting and explains that these creatures walk upright, so they should be even smarter than wolves. The man says he agrees with Sergeant Shin and asks what will happen if they attack first. The red-haired guy says they'll attack first, but the dark-haired guy remains silent. The blue-haired man explains this with concern. Yunjung says they have an advantage because they're at their base, and if they leave, they'll lose it. The man replies curtly. The man says they better not go out, and the other man explains that they just need to watch the opponent's actions and come up with a strategy. The man says he'll report to the company commander and find out what he thinks, and the guy explains that he'll tell the guys to be careful. The man is silent. The man says that when the news spreads, the army will be frightened. The man says that it is the fear of an unknown enemy and explains that they need to be reassured so that they do not get upset. The chef's special sauce is called calm, and the chef's bean sprouts have a calming effect. The man explains that the troops are located where the monsters can't reach, and if they go out, there's a high chance of running into them, so it's better to stay here. The chef's special sauce is called support, and the add-on squid with kimchi is called chef's. A man says it was pretty scary, but now he seems to have gotten used to it, and another man explains that he also feels calmer. It's explained that it's Chef Nadezhda's special sauce and the chef's braised pork with vegetables, which sustains Nadezhda. The man says he'd be lying if he said he wasn't worried, but he believes in his family and that he's alive, so they should survive too. The man says that somehow they managed to keep the soldiers' spirits high so that the defense didn't crack. The man says that the revivals were also successful and numbered about 20, which is almost a fifth of the entire battalion. The guy asks if they are still there, and the man explains that they are still wandering around the perimeter. The voice says there are almost twice as many of them as when they were first noticed. The guy asks what will happen when their number exceeds 100, and the man in military uniform explains that a decent number of the awakened were riflemen, so they will cope. The man says that out of about 20 awakened, they have 3 shooters, and explains that it is incredibly difficult to accurately hit the target when shooting from a regular K2 explosive rifle. The guy says that if they counterattack, they won't lose, and explains that if they continue to develop at this pace, they will win. The man explains that food will run out next week and about half of their people will be awakened. The guy says they can function normally without his enhancements. The man says he's finished taking inventory. The guy is screaming that the power is out. The guy is surprised how this could have happened and explains that the maintenance department said the generators were fine. The man asks if this happened throughout the entire base. The guy says that if this is their job. A man runs with a gun in his hands. The guy shouts that it is dangerous. The man says the shooters will do the job, but only if the field of view is not damaged. The man says there is no light. The man says they are absolutely useless. A man orders them to take their positions, and another man tells the gunners to go up to the roof for a better view. The men respond that they definitely have it. The man orders the rest of the awakened to focus on their tasks. A man with a gun explains that he can't shoot because he can't see a target, and asks to raise his hand if anyone sees a target. A man standing nearby raises his hand. The man reports that all troops have gathered in the ammunition depot and orders the entrance to be blocked. A man pushes a door. Another man looks at him. A man asks his brother what the situation is, and his brother explains that the soldiers' deployment is almost complete. The man explains that, fortunately, they still have flares, so the gunners will be able to see where they are, adding that he doesn't know how useful that will be. The guy says that although there are not thousands of monsters, if they are not pacified, they will have problems. Yun asks where the awakened ones are, and the man explains that he distributed them around the shooters. They explain that the mages were divided into attack and defense, and the warriors took a defensive position, and that their spirits should not suffer, so they helped them with this today during dinner. Yun explains that this is a battlefield where one can train and practice combat skills. A man with a short haircut lifts his shield with effort, defending himself from an attack. Yun explains that weapons can now be used, holding a battle axe in his hand. The man asks what now, and the guy says he will take advantage of it. The guy asks if he will go into close combat and whether it would be better to stay in the rear, and Yun explains that he is the first awakened here. The man says he couldn't stop him. An empty stage with Coke cans swinging on a rope and the sounds of wind and knocking. A man explains that he can't find something in the dark. The guy says he can't afford to lose. A man with binoculars explains that there is no one in the area, and another man with a rifle says that we need to be on guard. Several creatures with sharp tails rush forward, raising dust and creating bright flashes of light. Two monsters with red eyes and light manes roar and rush at each other. They rush along the ground, preparing for a fight. The guy shouts at the captain to give the order, and the captain replies that he understands. A voice orders all troops to open fire. A man fires a machine gun. The man continues to fire, clutching the weapon. The man fires at a target. An intense firefight ensues, bullets flying towards the creatures with red eyes and sharp teeth that are trying to get closer. A monster with red eyes and long hair rushes into battle, destroying the stone structures around itself. The monster screams and makes growling sounds when it is hit and thrown back. Several dragons scream and fight, exchanging powerful blows and fiery flashes. The guy says his cooking works great. The man says that if it weren't for the flares, they would have had a hard time and that they would have had to be much more careful. The man reports that the boss has come out, a demon with horns and sharp teeth attacks, striking. The monster screams. The man says he is the most dangerous and orders the shooters to concentrate fire on him. A man explains that he needs ammunition while another man inserts a magazine into a gun. The guy says he'll put him to bed. The guy is screaming what's going on. The man asks where he is. It is reported that Yunjong's skill, the chief's eye, has been used. It is explained that the leader lizard is the rarest and strongest of all lizards, unmatched by any other, and its decisions are unquestioned. The guy says he is the lizard's leader. The man says he is too fast and dodges all the bullets. The guy says they are the same species after all. Yun says that no matter how strong he is, it is foolish to put himself forward as a commander. The monster screams and spews rage, turning around and showing sharp teeth and a long tongue. The image depicts a powerful explosion or burst of purple energy emanating from a creature with horns and sharp teeth at the center of the blast. Another creature with red eyes and a long mane appears to the lower right, poised to attack or defend. Two monsters with red eyes and sharp teeth make ominous sounds, surrounded by purple energy streams. A loud impact sound is heard, followed by a vortex of purple waves that engulf the area with fortifications and groups of people. A man screams that he is making a painful sound and another man screams. A man screams, clutching his head. The guy screams, "What kind of attack is this?" And the man groans. The voice explains that they were under the influence of a powerful skill called a battle cry, and the strength, speed, and health of all the lizards instantly increased. All lizards also became bulletproof. A man explains that enemy forces are already approaching their position and warns them to prepare for a defense immediately. Another man says he has received updated radar data and confirms that preparation time is limited. All nearby non-lizard creatures will suffer the effects of confusion, distraction, and sloppiness. The man on the right explains that the shield absorbs damage but cannot protect against attacks from behind, while the man on the left explains that the shield cannot protect against attacks from behind or from the side. The man screams. The boy remains silent. The man says to Yun-jun. The guy says he can't believe it. A guy asks if another guy is okay, who's complaining of feeling dizzy. The man reports that all the shooters were hit. The man says that the monsters are over there and is surprised that the ability has such a strong effect. 3 monsters with a purple glow surround the space. A monster with red eyes and an open mouth screams. The man says that everything is exactly as the system said and explains that because of the confusion effect, no one can pull themselves together. The man says their defenses are falling. The man shouts what they are doing. The man shouts for them to pull themselves together and resume the fire. Several creatures with red eyes and light hair leap forward, leaving behind a trail of fire and sparks. The monster screams. 2 men fire automatic weapons. One of them looks ahead tensely and presses himself against cover. Yun-jung says that their rate of fire has dropped significantly and explains that it must be a debuff from the special lizard. The man says their bullets don't work and orders them to give all the bullets to the awakened soldiers. He explains that the bullets from the awakened soldiers don't even leave a scratch. The man in camouflage explains that if he had such power, then why hadn't he used it before? The man explains that the message said it was a temporary effect, so the debuff would end soon, and says that he was probably waiting for the right moment to attack. The guy says this monster really thought everything through. The guy says that we need to gather all the awakened ones. The man listens. The man says there's no point in long-range attacks anymore and that we need to prepare for close combat. The man listens with a tense expression. The man asks if everyone has one. A man asks what this is. A man with a cookie in his hand turns to Sergeant Shin and asks if this is for a snack. The man says that he will tell them now. Yun-jun explains that some may have already guessed that his chef skills can empower others. A man asks if everyone ate before waking up. Yun-jung says he didn't know what the monsters could do, so he prepared buffs in advance that would be tailored to the abilities of the people he was talking to. The man says there is no need to be afraid and explains that if they stick to the training they will have a chance. The man says they will do everything to keep this place. The man replies yes, sir, and shouts forward. Yun-jung explains that the entire battalion has now been reinforced. The guy tells Kwang-il that he is responsible for the boss. The man screams that he will beat him to death, and then explains that due to the use of high-quality ingredients, the effects have been enhanced. The man shouts that everyone is doing. The man screams that he can't hold on any longer and that they are coming. All stats have been significantly increased for a day. The attack boost effect has been applied. The monster screams that here they are. Yun-jung shouts that they are surrounded, and the soldiers retreat in panic, trying to defend themselves from the advancing shadow creatures. The man clenches his hands, surrounded by purple energy, and lunges forward. The man creates a glowing magic circle in front of himself and prepares for action. The guy screams and clenches his fist, radiating energy from his eyes. A monster attacks a man with powerful beams of energy. The man tries to defend himself from the attack. A guy yells and attacks monsters with fire, and another guy yells and strikes a creature with lightning. The guy shouts that he is on the right and orders everyone to stay with him. The guy shouts at them not to wander off. 2 soldiers fight off an attacking monster with red eyes and a tongue sticking out, with one of the soldiers screaming. The guy is screaming and the man says he needs to eat too. Man says lizard leader makes them stronger. The guy says he can't handle them alone, even if he were a first-class chef. Jun explains that his vision has been activated. They explain that they ate chocolate chip cookies of courage, prepared with passion by a novice chef, and that the dish's effectiveness is multiplied if it's prepared for and consumed by a specific person. A man screams, defending himself from attacking monsters. A guy screams die while attacking a monster. Jung explains that the mood of the battlefield can now be controlled with his average courage, and says that ordinary lizards are no longer a problem. A man with red eyes and energy around him says that brave fighters now command the battle. Another man with purple energy around him explains that the stats and morale of enemy targets will be slightly reduced. The monster falls rapidly down, breaking the ground. A man screams, surrounded by a vortex of red energy. The text explains that the effect of medium courage has neutralized the confusion. The guy is shouting that we need to move forward, guys. The man shouts that a courageous fight awaits them. The man reports that hordes of monsters are moving towards the entrance and orders all troops to be concentrated there. The man says that Kwang-il will clear the way. The guy screams and hits the creature's paw. A man in camouflage screams, releasing energy and rushing forward, causing flames and dust. The man screams, showing rage and strength. The man screams and lunges at the monster. The monster roars and prepares to attack. The monster punches, and the man parries the attack and counterattacks. The monster and the man continue to fight, exchanging powerful blows. The man shouts that it is amazing. The man is surprised that the statistics have doubled and asks what the other person did. The guy in camouflage says that with the upgrades, they'll definitely crush the enemies and make short work of them. The man with the sword explains that, as expected, he's an integral part of their squad. The man tells them not to relax and explains that they need to hold off the lizards for as long as possible while Kwang-il deals with the leader, so they should focus on long-range support. Jun says he can be counted on and encourages them to hold on a little longer, explaining that victory is already near. A man screams, "Oh, oh," and a creature with red eyes and sharp teeth makes sharp sounds, surrounded by a magic circle. Two soldiers fire machine guns. A man screams as he attacks with a sword, surrounded by electric shocks. Another man screams. The guy sharply dodges the intersecting glowing lines. Two men scream and strike the demon at the same time. A man with red glowing eyes and a snake wrapped around his neck screams. The man is surprised. A man screams. The monster roars. The man screams in surprise. The monster suddenly fights off a man who tries to attack him, and simultaneously knocks another man down. The man screams that he's caught her and grabs her by the clothes. His hand, covered in blood, clutches the fabric. The guy is screaming. The demon grabs two men and spins them sharply in the air. The image shows the moment of an attack or collision with a large creature with sharp teeth and claws. The monster falls to the ground with force and screams. The image shows a motion scene where a dark purple hand with outstretched fingers is suddenly raised or thrown upward, accompanied by an explosion of dust and flying debris. The man says the job was done well. A man screams. A man screams. A man falls from above, heading straight towards a large demon with an open mouth. The man screams and delivers a powerful punch downwards. The man shouts that he will not give up. The man slams his fist, surrounded by energy, into the surface, causing a bright flash and flying sparks. The image shows a creature with sharp teeth and a glowing eye spitting blood and making a noise, expressing aggression or pain. The guy screams and attacks the monster, dealing multiple blows. The guy is screaming. There is a broken stone lying on the ground next to blood stains, and next to it you can see a part of a body with sharp teeth and a yellow eye. There are two wounded creatures lying on the floor with blood around them. One of them is trying to get up, and the other is looking towards the open door, from which the silhouette of a large creature is visible. The guy asks if everything is okay and warns not to let down their guard, as there may still be monsters left, then asks the senior officers to confirm the condition of the squad members. The guy on the right says he's already eaten today, and the guy on the left says he always works. The guy says they won. The man explains that even when the soldiers' weapons were immobilized, control of Korea, Zone 17 has been seized. Party-level personnel have been temporarily designated Squad 423 until they achieve guild-level influence. The man says he can't believe this happened. He explains he didn't expect such a turn of events. A man looks at a holographic screen. The text states that the world event is the status of the occupation battle, and explains the status of the occupation battle in Zone 17, which is tied to Korea, with 2 unknown points and percentages. The man says this is Unit 423. The screen displays a list with items 11 and 12, where 12 is the unofficial Unit 423 with a percentage of 3%. The first large human-occupied space under the affiliation is reported to be in Korea. The man says the achievement is complete and everything from here to there is his, then explains that a reward is given for first place. The man is silent. The guy says they won first place. A boy screams, a man points, and other soldiers fight among themselves in the hallway. A man orders the seriously wounded to be brought here. Another man asks to stay with him. A man shouts for water. Another man tells Mr. Park to hold on. Another man explains to bring people in critical situations here. The man explains that without treatment, the consequences could be serious and asks for consent to the procedure. Yun-Yung agrees to the treatment. A man screams when his hand touches an injured body part. A guy in a military uniform asks God for help, while another guy leans forward tensely. The guy screams that the pain is gone. A man in camouflage explains that the situation is gradually stabilizing. A man in dark clothing stands nearby and listens. Yun-Yung says it's a good job. The man in camouflage explains that he doesn't deserve any credit for it, because it was all done by Kwang Il and Soo-hyuk. The man explains that they are both exhausted and worn out. The guy asks if he's seen the squad leader. The man replies that he doesn't know for sure, but it seems the commander was here before the battle began and explains that it would be difficult to clear out the ammunition depot with just the 2 of them. The guy says he expected it to be a tough fight. He asks if the other person has checked everything and how much territory they now have, and the other person explains that, in his opinion, they have captured the entire mountain range, after which the first one clarifies the mountain range. The man with the shovel says it's all correct and points to the fact that it's written that way. The man with the tablet listens. Yun-Jong says that they were dropped off at the peak of a mountain range, and explains that the only enemy forces along the entire perimeter of the ridge were the lizards. A man asks if something is wrong. The man says he wonders if it has anything to do with their height values. The man says that if you think about it, because they defeated the mountain lizards, they were mistaken for invaders. The man says what he thinks, and that's how it was. Yun-Jun says that he has already eaten today. The guy asks what else. The man explains that the lizards suffered huge losses due to yesterday's battle and suggests launching a counterattack. The guy agrees. The guy says this is a great chance to finish it all in one hit. He says it will be difficult and asks why. He explains that yesterday's battle was tough, and despite having the advantage of territory, they almost lost. The monsters run forward. One of them explains that if they made even one small mistake, they would all be killed immediately. The man explains that they have awakened fighters and they could combine that with the enhancement Yun-Jun provided to gain an advantage. The man says it's best not to rely on this improvement anymore. A man explains that they use high-quality ingredients and personalized flavors, and that each dish takes 4 to 7 hours to prepare. Another man is surprised, saying that means these dishes aren't that simple. Yun-Jong explains that he had been preparing for the invasion long before this moment, and if he had started from scratch, he would have run out of time. However, the high-quality ingredients he had prepared in advance were perfect for awakening the fighter's powers. He adds that perhaps even with ordinary ingredients he could have achieved the desired effect. The man says he was being careless, thinking the process was so simple, and explains that they'll just postpone it until later. The guy says that's true. The guy tells them to come back when they're done, and the other explains there's another truck there. The man says it feels like they'll never end. The man explains that it won't be possible to burn all the bodies and asks where they should all be transported. The guy says he's already thought about bonuses. The guy mentions bonuses for first place and lists the options. Lord Valorac's invitation, Bymon's mobile fortress, Nebuchadnezzar's keys, the call of the deep, the path upward, the tome of reverse, and the broken sword. He explains that he's seen these options but doesn't know what to choose yet. The guy says he has the same thing. The man explains the same thing. The man says the choice is his. The boy explains that it's very important, and he doesn't know how to choose. The man explains that it doesn't matter what he chooses without information and says he feels more confident if he's the one making the choice. The man says that others also trust the choice of the interlocutor and there is no need to be afraid, everything is fine. The man explains that they can't even ask the commander because he's disappeared somewhere. The guy says he'll just pick Bymon's mobile fortress. The guy with dark hair explains that he is trying to guess the name of the bonus, and the guy with red hair is surprised and asks why. The guy says he thinks it'll be a giant chariot or at least a tank, and then asks if they need chariots. Yunyung says that even if they don't need her now, they will definitely need her at some point, and explains that sooner or later they will run out of supplies, so they will have to leave this place and move on. The guy says he doesn't know exactly what it is, but it should help them, and the other guy explains that they choose bonus number 2 and encourages them to go forward. The guy says he always works, and the guy explains that he already ate today. The man says that then he will press him. The man explains that it is a holographic screen. The man explains that the Bymon Mobile Fortress bonus has been selected and that Bymon's summoning power will be granted to Shin Yenyong. The man shouts. The man clenches his fist, and an energetic glow begins to appear around it. He moves his hand sharply, creating a vortex of energy. The guy says the summoning power is impressive and he will summon the fortress right now. The man says he is calling on Bymon. Several fallen creatures with red eyes and light hair lie on the ground. A man and a boy look up. The guy says he has already eaten today. The man explains that there is not enough space in this place for summoning, and the other man is surprised. The boy is surprised by the huge field and asks how big it is. The man explains that it's because there are so many bodies. The man says we can try. The man suggests calling her at the barracks. The man explains that that's what they'll do. A man says to finish here ourselves, and another man confirms this. The man says that even near the barracks there is not enough space. The man says it's starting to irritate him. The man says he's gaining experience and explains that he gets an experience point every time someone who eats his dish applies the resulting enhancement. Information appears about the class of a level 9 novice chef with stats of 12 strength, 13 dexterity, 10 magic, and 10 luck, as well as Yun Zhong says that he is getting stronger, and with this awakening the troops are also getting stronger, so he will lie down for a little while. A man in military uniform says he has found Yang Zhong. A man in uniform says he wishes Lieutenant Kim well, and the boy salutes. The man in camouflage says he heard the guy had a hard time and praises him for a good job, and the guy explains that it's what he had to do. The man says there are many people who don't do their jobs, but the hero is not only responsible but also a cook. The man explains that he doesn't appreciate the hero's praise. The man says that he considers himself flawless and that he is a human being. The man explains that he is brilliant only in words, but in important situations he leaves everything to the soldiers, giving in. The man explains that he went to check the communication system in case of unforeseen situations, and says that there is no good news yet, but he is glad that he and Minjae guided the awakened ones so harmoniously. The guy is surprised and then tells what he thinks about the two from the transport unit who were sent to a higher-ranking unit. The guy says he doesn't think they'll come back and explains that after 10 days, even if they get in touch, they won't get any help. The man explains that they won't be able to get there safely with the monsters swarming around. A man says he noticed another man wasn't cooking and was snacking on dry rations. The other man explains he's planning to do the same and offers to grab one for the other man. The man suggests cooking something for the others instead. The man is surprised. The guy explains that it's a bit difficult and that he needs to save food because there's not much of it, and he's only thinking about how to prepare a meal that will satisfy everyone. The man in camouflage says that if anyone says anything, they should answer that it is for them because they are in charge here, and clarifies that another man is preparing for those guys whose turn it is to wake up. The man says he wants to find fault with this. The man explains that the awakening process is dangerous, so he prepares special food to relieve tension, and tells Lieutenant Kim that if he wants to awaken, He is ready at any time. The man asks what he's cooking for those who have already awakened. Yun explains that this food is necessary for their safety, as they must always be prepared for an attack. The man says he doesn't believe food can enhance their abilities, and considers it a fairy tale. The man explains that, firstly, he is the only officer left in their unit. A man in a military uniform explains that there are still armies in the outside world, and if they ever come into direct contact with them, their officer will be more useful than ever. The guy says that, in truth, he still can't feel the effects of these dishes and that he has no choice but to endure. The man remains silent. The man in camouflage says that he does not eat anything and explains that since the situation is like this, he will simply ignore this point, adding that it is not so easy to take care of the awakened. A loud slam of the door is heard. The man says he could smoke a fat cigar right now. The man says that since the mountain range became their territory, monster attacks have decreased by almost half, and sometimes monsters attack alone, then they are easy to defeat. The man says the situation is quite stable and explains that they had a hard time while Yun was not at the base. A man in military uniform says he heard details from other wounded and praises Yun for his good work, who explains that it is the merit of those who fight for their lives. The guy asks what about the other guy's leg. The guy says the doctor said everything would have been fine if he had been treated immediately after the injury, but too much time had passed since the fracture. The man says that fortunately, although walking is difficult, he has no health problems. The guy in camouflage explains that he could blame someone else for the injury. He says this while looking down, and the guy in blue with a yellow collar listens. The man in camouflage stands nearby, watching intently. The man calls out to Yun and says it's not his fault, so he shouldn't make that face. Yun remains silent. The man explains that if they hadn't tried to wake them up, they would have been eaten by monsters. The man explains that he was injured during a military operation. The man explains that it's not his fault, since they were following orders. The man says that thanks to Yun they survived and he literally saved them. A man says he can't forget how his father died and that he hasn't been able to forgive himself for it. The guy says he has something to show. A man in a wheelchair says his specialty is stargazing. A man grips the handle of a wheelchair with glowing particles floating around it. The man explains that it is reading the movement of the stars' trajectories, looking into the constellations and predicting travels, and adds that it is something confusing, so you just need to know. The man says that predicting the future by the stars is something like that, yes, and then explains that, simply put, yes. The guy says it's as expected from a communications soldier. The man says that this may have nothing to do with actual combat, but it allows one to detect danger in advance, and explains that this is very useful in planning operations and strategies. The man in the wheelchair says that's why he wanted to see the guy. The guy is surprised. The guy says he figured out two things. He says that guests will arrive tomorrow and wonders what kind of unexpected guests they are. Yun says it's better to hide your claws. The man says there is a military base there. The guy shouts that let's go look, and the man says that there are soldiers too. The man says, "Mommy." And the woman explains that they will survive now. A man shouts that they need to get there quickly, and a group of people runs in that direction. The man says, "Let's run." The soldier who first spotted them says they were a squad of 20 survivors. He explains that they were all wearing tattered clothing and, judging by their location, thinks they'll arrive at base within an hour. A man in camouflage explains that there is a group of 10 people ahead, and a man with binoculars explains that they are heading towards the camp. The man asks why they ignored the signs prohibiting entry to the military base and explains that he doesn't understand where they escaped from. The man asks what they will do. The man says that the commander, as usual, is nowhere to be seen, and Yun explains that these are civilians who got here with difficulty, and thinks that they should be helped to get to the base. The man explains that they need help first. A man picks up binoculars. The man asks if Yun spoke about these guests. The man asks everyone to calm down and explains that they will first make a list of names, and then says that they will be happy to cooperate. A man in a military uniform asks for a full name. A man in a military uniform explains that they have water and asks for it to be distributed to others. The guy explains that after compiling the lists, it turned out that there were almost 25 people, not 20, and they were all of different ages and genders. The man in camouflage says that the first step is to formalize the relocation of people from the third floor to the second floor as soon as possible, and allow the new arrivals to settle in the place of people from the third floor, and suggests increasing the number of night shift workers until the situation calms down. The guy says that it sounds logical and they need to start right now, otherwise they might not make it before the evening. A man in a military uniform says that they're doing a great job, and another man in a military uniform responds with a salute. The guy is surprised. The guy asks if the commander has returned, and the man explains that, in his opinion, the commander came only for show. Kim Hyun-suk greets everyone and tells them that he is a lieutenant in command of this unit, then explains that everyone is safe now, so they don't have to worry and can listen to the soldiers with confidence. The man says they were a little worried seeing only soldiers and asks if he's in charge. Yun-young explains that he is and asks them not to worry. The man asks how things are going in the detachment and says they'd like to know more. The boy asks if they have food. The man explains that they're in trouble and the children are very hungry. The man asks not to panic and explains that as soon as the list of names is ready, they will update everyone. A soldier orders the men to be brought inside. Another soldier confirms the order. The man asks where Min-jae and Yun-jun are. The guy in camouflage says let's go, he's looking for them. A guy in camouflage says they're here. The man in camouflage explains that these guys are in charge here and orders them to look for these soldiers when he's not around. The man asks the sergeant if there are any spaces left in the dormitory for these people. The sergeant explains that he thinks there are a couple of spaces. The man explains that he is not satisfied with this answer. The man explains that he is taking responsibility for distributing people and that he will later carefully check whether the order has been carried out correctly, and also tells him to report problems as they arise and asks if the order is clear. The man says that once the dorm distribution is complete, food needs to be prepared for everyone because people have been starving for months, and asks Yun-jun to prepare an additional 25 servings. The guy says he agrees. The man remains silent. They explain that there are 99 soldiers and 25 survivors. They say that extra rations for the arriving people have been prepared in advance and don't understand why they need to emphasize this to the public. They explain that the soldiers will now take care of the people and urge everyone to carefully follow their instructions. The man with green hair says they understand. The man in blue explains that nothing less should have been expected from the commander, since he handled everything himself. The man in blue explains that they are now safe. The guy in camouflage says that she's not the only one who irritates him and asks to look at that smile, and the guy in blue uniform explains that in any case, he's their commander. A soldier explains that some people did not listen to the soldiers when they tried to direct them to the unit. The man in camouflage says that as soon as Lieutenant Kim arrived, everyone almost immediately began to follow their orders, and explains that Lieutenant Kim's words have more influence than those of ordinary soldiers. The man says that's exactly it. A man in a military uniform says it's his duty to protect citizens. So he's simply doing what he has to do. The man explains that everyone is safe now. The man thanks the lieutenant for everything. The guy says he's a jerk. Not only does he not work, but he's also greedy and knows how to pull the wool over people's eyes. The man explains that now is not the time to be doing such nonsense and says he'll go to the kitchen, and the other guy should take care of the rest. The guy says it's a great idea. The man explains that they need to take a few guys with them, and the guy agrees. The guy screams and runs. The man explains he can't afford it, the woman says he shouldn't do it, and the man says they should figure it out together. The man is surprised that the third floor is not the top floor and explains that it would be difficult for an old man like him to constantly climb the stairs. The guy calms the elder down and explains that monsters usually attack the first floor, and they haven't encountered any winged monsters yet, so this is the safest place. The guy says he just wanted to live in comfort. The man remains silent. The woman says they can finally take a shower, and the man says he felt so disgusted he thought he was going to die. A man in camouflage says there's no hot water and asks for understanding. A girl complains that she can't take a cold shower. A man in green explains that it's better than nothing. The man says life is always good when the food is so good. The boy confirms that the food is very tasty. The guy says he couldn't even imagine that rice could be so tasty and explains that it's simply delicious. asking if it's really army food. The man says it all happened so suddenly that he is still confused. The man says he is still worried about food. The man says that expenses will increase by 25% and explains that they have already used up almost all the essential food products, so now they will have to survive on spare and dry rations. The guy explains that this should be enough for a month, but the man says it wasn't just delicious, it was excellent, and laughs, expressing gratitude. The guy explains he's glad they liked it. The man marvels that he's never eaten anything so delicious in his life. The man says that his interlocutor is an excellent cook and asks what his specialty is. The guy is surprised and says that this is a specialty. The guy wonders why he's asking the soldier what his specialty is and says he almost answered that he was a chef. The boy explains that he was a student before being drafted into the army, and the man says that in any case they ate well. The man is surprised that it is strange to ask someone so directly about his profession. The man explains that in their unit the term specialization lost its common meaning long ago. The guy explains that he is a cook, but a man in military uniform says that not only are they fighting monsters, but now they also have to look after a group of survivors. The guy says that now they don't even have time to catch their breath, and the man wonders how they got to this point. A man shouts that his patience is at its limit, and another explains that since Lieutenant Kim received an important position, work has only increased and he is only bragging. The man says it would be better to put Sergeant Lee in his place. Although hot-tempered, he's clearly more humane and would likely take his job much more responsibly than Lieutenant Kim. The man explains that he and Lieutenant Kim have been through a lot together, and a certain feeling has developed between them. The man speaks of camaraderie. The man explains that Lieutenant Kim will remain in his position for a while longer and explains that he would understand if he risked his life to protect his comrades and survivors, but he is simply bragging about his rank. The guy says he's always been like this and that the commander can do something. The man shouts that's exactly it. The man says they are seriously fighting monsters, and instead of helping, he is putting them and their resources in danger. The man says that everyone thinks the same way. The guy feels it when he looks at Lieutenant Kim. The voice asks who would want to follow a commander who has shamefully disappeared from the battlefield. The man says that if this continues, there will be problems with morale and unity. The man looks forward with a serious expression. A man asks Sergeant Lee Min-jae if everyone except the workers has gathered. Another man explains to Hyun that they must hold a secret meeting, and that it's necessary. The man explains that he apologizes for gathering everyone at such a late hour. The man says he doesn't think it's possible to turn a blind eye to this situation any longer, and explains that it's simply painful for him to watch the guys work like horses. The man explains that he recently visited Lieutenant Kim. The guy is surprised and says it's true, and the man asks what they talked about. The man says there is nothing surprising about this and explains that he simply asked to pay attention to the soldiers for whom he is responsible, and also explains that he advised consulting with other equally important people when making decisions. The man explains that none of this made any sense, as he expected. The man explains that his job is to make decisions and theirs is to carry them out, and that soldiers and other people have no right to impose their opinions on him. The man is silent. The man says that he has decided to shut them up, explains that he doesn't take their opinions into account at all and doesn't even think about fighting alongside them. The guy is surprised and then says that everyone is really so united. The man says this is an extremely serious problem that their lives depend on, so he has called everyone to a meeting and would like to make the first proposal. A man with a short haircut and sharp eyebrows expresses bewilderment. A man in military uniform explains that the point is to strip Lieutenant Kim of his powers. The guy yells that this is definitely a good idea, and the man says stop. The boy shouts that he can't do this to the lieutenant and wonders what's happening to him. The man explains that he won't support him and asks him to think carefully about whether he's tired of following the lieutenant's orders. The guy says he's still the commander and explains that even if he gives a strange order, they can always discuss it among themselves or do everything differently. The man asks how long this will continue and explains that perhaps, as more and more survivors join them, their group will expand and become many times larger. The guy says that if Lieutenant Kim takes the initiative every time such an expansion happens, then what will become of them? A man in a military uniform says that the more people there are, the more authority the lieutenant gains in the eyes of those present. The man explains that there will come a point when they won't be able to move a finger of their own free will. Another man asks what they think about this and whether he's wrong about anything. The man explains that he would have kept quiet if he had the ability, but he was only successful in appearance, and says that everyone knows perfectly well that he has no skills. The guy says the thought of Lieutenant Kim still leading them is a little unsettling, and the other guy says he once shared an office with Lieutenant Kim and it was really bad. The guy says he means aren't they in the army and explains that there is a military system here, but he was acting like a spoiled 6-year-old. The man asks Kwang Il what he thinks about this, and Kwang Il explains that he doesn't know for sure yet, but he thinks the idea is too dubious even considering that there is a war going on, and it somehow doesn't inspire confidence. The man says that's a good point. The boy is surprised. The man says that when Lieutenant Kim, the only officer in the unit, is removed, there will be 2 people left with the next highest ranks, Pak Tae-jun and Shin Young-jun, and they both almost made it to demobilization. It is explained that, in the absence of officers, even ordinary soldiers can act as commanders. A man in a military uniform remains silent while a group of people watches him. The man explains that in the event of a clash with the outside army, there will be no problems, even if Yun-jong himself is in command. Yun-jong is surprised. The man explains that the reason for gathering on the roof of this building is that getting rid of Lieutenant Kim is just a thought for now and there's no need to worry. The guy says he wants to understand what the man is talking about and asks if he wants him to be a commander, and also wonders what kind of. The guy says he's responsible for the most important part, feeding the fighters and making them stronger on the battlefield, and the other guy starts objecting. The man in camouflage says that his second proposal and the main topic of the day is for Sergeant Shin Young-jun to take command. A man in camouflage says that if there are objections, they should speak up. A guy in dark clothes with an orange collar explains that the cook can't be allowed to become a commander. The man says Sergeant Shin always thinks of them first and has given them food to cheer them up many times. The man says he can be relied upon and explains that if it weren't for the buffs, they would have been dead long ago. The man in camouflage says that no one objects, so everyone agrees. Yun-jung objects. The man explains that from now on, Sergeant Shin will be their leader, and Shin is indignant that it is not right for him to be called a leader and at the same time ignore him like that. The man says to just accept it. The man is surprised. The screen reports that the condition has been met. 30 out of 31 people have recognized the new leader. The current composition is 30 soldiers and 1 leader. The man explains that the clan has been created and that they've managed to form the smallest raiding unit, a clan of 30 people. The man is surprised that this is a clan. The man explains that the clan is the first step to forming a full-fledged group that goes beyond a temporary group, and explains that it demonstrates a level of cohesion that is not typical of groups at a lower level. The man announces that the achievement has been achieved and congratulates his comrades. He explains that the clan has promotion rewards such as the second-place reward, a group skill. The voice explains that he is now the leader of the 423rd clan. Shin Young-jun talks about his awakening, his job as a level 9 apprentice chef, his membership in the 423 clan, and his position as the clan leader, before revealing that he has truly become the leader. The guy sighs, and Yun-jun says that he has no choice but to accept it as a fact. A group of soldiers say that Captain Shin will have to work even harder in the near future and ask him to take care of them. The guy says that since this is how it turned out, he will have to give it his all. The man says his first suggestion would be to abandon the idea of killing the unsuspecting Lieutenant Kim. The man is surprised. The guy shouts that he is calling for Yun-jun. The man says that, knowing the current situation in the unit, he needs to think again about what good he will do then. The guy asks to calm down and listen to him. A man suggests they start killing everyone they meet for immediate gain. Another man explains that they will then turn into monsters that look like humans. The guy explains what is needed to keep their squad from losing their humanity. The guy explains that one cannot attack, let alone kill, those who did not wish them harm. The guy asks them to swear that they will never do that again. The man says that everything is going as he planned and explains that this is a leadership thought. The man says they will follow orders, but wonders what will happen to Lieutenant Kim and finds it odd that they now have 2 commanders. The man explains that eliminating Lieutenant Kim was a good idea. The guy says they just did. The man explains that he's nothing but trouble right now, but getting rid of him would be a waste. The guy says they'll make a useful puppet out of him. The man on the right is surprised. The man in the center and the man on the left are silent. The manga's title is The Pied Piper's Desperate World. At night, a group of people walk past a building with a South Korean flag. The man says the soldiers have already returned. The man suggests going for a walk to cheer himself up, and Yeonjun asks if that would be a problem. The man says there's no need to be afraid because they're just 20-year-old brats. The man with short dark hair says that the senior officer turned out to be a kind man with a strong military spirit and offers to join a group with him, and the man with short hair explains that he asks to check a certain case. The man says he recently surreptitiously injected several soldiers, and there have been no signs of awakening yet. The guy in camouflage says he can't go with them because he has things to do. The man in the brown jacket says he won't get leave if he doesn't go. The man in the light jacket explains he won't get leave if he doesn't go on the mission. A man with short dark hair says he also quickly looked around and noticed that firearms were being used to kill the monsters. A man screams. The man says there is a high probability that there will be no awakenings and explains that he does not think anything else could prevent them. The man with short dark hair asks when they'll get started. The man with dark hair and a beard remains silent. The man with short light hair explains that they're ready. The man says that they will monitor the situation for a few days just in case, and if everything is normal, they will be able to start right away, but it is still better to be on the safe side. The man speaks. The man says that they have finished distributing supplies, and the other man explains that he will rest a bit and will return to the guys soon. The woman explains that the clan leader's token is proof that a person is a member of the clan. The guy asks if this is a new piece of equipment and explains that the group skill, token, allows you to select an object that can become a symbol of the group and use it as a token. He explains that the token can only be worn by those in the group, and it provides a stat bonus depending on the scale. Yeonjun says the item is surprisingly useful, and it turns out that when the party level increases, some nice effects are applied to its members. The man regrets that the only thing that can be used as a symbol is a simple token. The man says everything will be fine, as the guys are thrilled with the reaction. The guy is surprised that even if he becomes the leader, the situation won't change. The guy says there are already rumors circulating in the squad that he's strong enough to kill a monster with just a knife. He grips the knife tightly in his hand. The man says that in such a volatile situation on all fronts, they need a strong leader, and that's exactly what they need. He explains that he completely trusts and is ready to follow his interlocutor's lead. The guy explains that although Kwang Il defeats monsters with his bare hands, he is a softie at heart. He says what he thinks, after which he explains that this is precisely why he nominated his interlocutor. A man in a military uniform greets him. Yeonjun asks if he's already arrived and done everything he asked for. A man in a military uniform says he told the soldiers to try to avoid personal questions, not to mention their specialty, and not to show it off in front of everyone, and he explains that he did a good job. The man explains that he told everyone to keep the story of the awakening a secret, so there is no need to worry. The man explains that Taejun said that he himself does not know the exact reason and thinks that it is not worth mentioning it yet, and the guy says that it is better to hide his claws for now. The man in military uniform says this doesn't mean the awakening process has stopped. The man in dark clothing explains that since the monster pacification is primarily carried out by awakened riflemen, the awakening process is simply necessary. The man says that they are extremely lucky that these creatures are killed by a bullet, and that their soldiers are good shots. The man says there is another problem and Yeonjun asks what it is. The man says that a group of survivors still asks for negotiations. In particular, one girl begs the soldiers every day for a deferment and says that the story she tells can help them. The girl asks if it's something important. The man explains that he doesn't know for sure, but she was the leader of the group they picked. The man explains that he decided it was worth talking to her as their leader because if Lieutenant Kim misunderstood what she said, it would be bad. The man says to leave the lieutenant to him and is surprised that his interlocutors are going to do something. Yeonjun says he'll handle it, and the man in the military uniform asks what's wrong. He says that they will do the following and explains that they need to choose 3 representatives from among the group of survivors, and ask them to come to the conference room on the second floor of the dormitory 3 days after dinner. The man says he's warning the soldiers again to never divulge information about the situation in the unit. The man replies that he understands. The man says that then we can go. The guy breathes a sigh of relief. Yunjun says that you need to implement what you have been putting off. The guy screams, and the man with the gun is surprised. A guy asks if there's a room under the kitchen, and another guy explains that there's always been a basement there as far back as he can remember. The man says yes and explains that the room was built to supply the kitchen with hot filtered water and electricity. There is a boiler and a generator there, and it is also quite spacious, so it can be considered a warehouse for military supplies. The guy explains what he thinks now it has a slightly different use, and the man asks in what sense. A man walks carrying a plate of food. The man says Min Jae thought a place where no one could hear him would be ideal as a prison cell. The guy explains that he brought food. He says he can't eat because he has no appetite. The man is surprised. The man asks if it is Yunjun. He says that Lieutenant Kim brought them a present. The man explains that if he fails to complete the task, he will be killed. A man in camouflage says the door is locked, and a man in camouflage with red hair points to the door and explains that it needs to be opened. The man in camouflage grabs the door handle and yanks the door open. The guy shouts that he always works, and the man says that he has already eaten today. The man explains that he has already eaten today. A guy in camouflage with a trolley in his hand shouts that he won't let this happen, and the guy behind him says he won't stand by either. The man in camouflage looks at them tensely. A man in military uniform screams as an electric shock hits him, and he tries to hold on to the armrests of his chair. A man screams that he cannot die because he lives in this world. The man says that he is ready to apologize to the soldiers if he offended them in any way, and asks Yunjun to listen to him. A man in a military uniform says that last time he spilled coffee on the radar and it malfunctioned, and he blamed it on the duty officer. The guy asks what. The man explains that he made mistakes, but took his anger out on the soldiers. The man explains that he is probably panicking because of this whole situation with the punishment cell, and explains that he has had a lot of time to think about all his actions. The man says he asked the administration for time off during work hours and relaxed in the warehouse, surprised that that wasn't all. The man explains that he'd done all sorts of things. The man in military uniform admits all his mistakes and asks for help, explaining that the other man gets along well with the soldiers in the unit. Yunjung explains that he, too, tried his best to persuade the soldiers, but it's difficult to do anything against a crowd, and that the soldiers are hostile to them. The man is surprised and says that this can't be. The man explains that he understands that it is difficult for them to accept this. A man in military uniform says that the situation is completely hopeless and that they have heard rumors of cases where officers were killed by soldiers of their own unit. The man says he will continue to try to convince them not to worry, and explains that it must be hard for them to be locked up, so they should eat this. The man says he sighs and calls Yunjun. A man says he made chicken pasta if you don't like noodles. Another man thanks Yunjun. The guy says he loves pasta and swirls it with a fork. A man eats noodles and says they are very tasty. The man says that at least this is some joy. The man says he managed to feed it. The guy says eat as much as you want, filling the moment with a feeling of happiness. The man eats. The man says he cooked from the corpse of a lizard. A guy in camouflage asks if it's okay to eat monsters that eat people, and Yunjun explains that food is running low. He says that although it is disgusting, the hero explains that at the moment there is nothing that could replace the products. Yunjun explains that he tried cooking several things as an experiment and explains that the monster dishes were the most delicious and nutritious, possibly due to the magical power that was in their bodies. The man in camouflage is surprised, asking if this is true, and the guy in dark clothes explains that he personally double-checked everything. A man reads that the title of Pioneer is awarded to a person who has explored a previously unexplored area of his specialization, and that the effectiveness of skills and characteristics related to the specialization is increased by 100%. The guy says that he thinks he can even win over Lieutenant Kim with this dish, and Yunjung asks about Lieutenant Kim. The man says to leave it to him. Lizard rose paste is filled with inexorable happiness. A new recipe has been developed using ingredients never before used in human history, and experience points are increasing. The man explains that perhaps because he hadn't eaten something so delicious in a long time, he suddenly felt so good and warm inside. Yunyung says he's glad the man liked it. A man screams. A man is washing the floor and the sound of water can be heard. Providing quality nutrition every day, he begins to talk about his actions. The man shouts that he hasn't cooked anything today and explains that he will suddenly stop giving this dish and replace it with tasteless army rations. The man yells that Yunjun is a bastard and asks where he went, then demands that he quickly cook him a normal meal. The man says that if everything goes according to plan, he will slowly but surely reach the limit. The guy says we can get started. The man wonders what the guy is thinking. Another man explains that he gave him 3 meals a day and adds that it is not worth talking about. The man says the lieutenant really enjoyed the lizard meat. A man says Sergeant Shin told him to catch a monster on the verge of awakening, and another man is surprised, asking if he's serious. Cough is heard. The man says it's not tasty at all. The man says to immediately prepare that dish for him and that it is his order. The guy remains silent. The man says that if the guy wants him to cook that dish again, he should ask him differently, and asks if that's what Lieutenant Kim thinks. The man screams that the other man has completely lost his mind. Yunjun explains that when the happiness he felt after that meal for several days disappears, withdrawal will set in. The guy says it's an officer's order and is surprised that the other guy refuses to obey his order. The man says that today they are talking nonsense again and explains that he will come tomorrow so that they have plenty of time to think about their behavior. The guy asks her to cook him that very dish because no matter how much he eats, nothing satisfies him, and he begs her to do it, promising to fulfill any condition. The man says that this is exactly what he wanted. The man says that in that case he will cook it for his interlocutor, but on one condition. The man screams that he can't believe what he's hearing. The guy explains that given the development trend in the field of awakening soldiers in the unit, the man is surprised. The man is surprised that this is it. The beast roars. The man is surprised that it is a lizard. Someone is screaming. A man clutches a knife covered in blood, his hand shaking. The man talks about Kim Hyun-suk's awakening and his specialization as a Tier 1 novice commander, and also explains his stats and talent, which increases the abilities of the soldiers under his command by 10%. The man is surprised and says that this is awakening. A message appears stating that awakening a novice commander increases abilities by 10%. The guy says the percentage has increased and it has exceeded his expectations. The man demands that Yunjun explain himself immediately, and Yunjun explains that this is the very lottery ticket that he accidentally found. The man says he was lucky. The guy says that he has already eaten today. The man explains that there are 2 main ways to increase abilities: a fixed increase and a percentage improvement. It explains that the fixed increase is more effective the lower the target's base ability. The stats are Strength 8, Dexterity 5, Magic 4. The man explains that the percentage improvement effect, on the contrary, increases as the base skill increases, and Lieutenant Kim's stats will be more effective as the unit's abilities increase. The values shown are 88, Dexterity 257, Magic 149, Luck 170. Achievement. Ineffable taste allows one to gain control over a person by preparing special dishes. It is explained that this is one of the most powerful achievements a chef can achieve, and the reward for achieving this is a premium ingredient, a dragon's heart. It is reported that you have passed Novice Chef Level 10 and have been promoted from Novice Chef Level 10 to Junior Chef Level 1. The man says that he used to be stuck at Level 9 and couldn't improve, but now the stats that used to increase by 1 point with each level increase are increasing by almost 3 points. The voice explains that all entry-level stats have been changed to low-level stats, including cooking mastery and fire resistance. The man explains that even at the entry level his abilities were at the level of a master chef, and asks what they have become now that they have grown 1 step further. The man is surprised and says that the dry rations are ready. The man says he likes the skill. The explanation says the skill is dry rations, new, and it has become possible to produce canned food for the unit. The man tries out the dry rations. It is explained that although their effectiveness is somewhat lower than that of regular dishes, they have a long shelf life and contain a large number of calories, despite their rather modest composition. The guy says the taste is also good and explains that now he doesn't have to worry about food. The man says that it would seem that Lieutenant Kim can be useful, but even he has some use. The guy says that everyone is ready and they can move out, and the other one asks if they will take Lieutenant Kim with them. The man explains that he can't go with them because of his cooking, and that Min Jae will be leading today. Another man asks what he means by his cooking. Yun Young says that they have nothing to worry about and asks them to trust Min Jae, explaining that he is still the next highest ranking person in their squad. The man says that someone else really thinks that he can just dump all the responsibilities on him. The guy says they discussed everything yesterday and asks why he started all over again, and then explains that although he accepted the role of leader, he does not intend to take on all the work. The man in camouflage says he understands and suggests they go faster. Another man in camouflage confirms, and Yun Jun says let's go ahead then. The man says that you can't relax too much. Recreation area in the hostel. A man in military uniform says they have arrived, and a woman replies that she is glad to see them. The guy in the gray hoodie says he and his friends aren't going to give up, and the man with slicked back blonde hair explains that they won't back down either. The girl is surprised. The guy in camouflage says that he always works, and Yun Jun explains that he already ate today. He says that among them there may be those who pose an immediate danger. A man in a wheelchair explains that, according to Taejun, they are now in a situation where they have to hide their abilities from them. The man stands and listens. They ask what strategy should be followed when talking to survivors. A man in camouflage tells them that they must extract as much information from them as possible without exposing themselves. Sergeant Lee Min-jae welcomes everyone present and announces that he will be overseeing this meeting. The girl is surprised. The man says he's asking where Lieutenant Kim is. The guy explains that it would be better for them, as those responsible for the main work in the detachment, to conduct this conversation, and the man says that they will convey all the important information to him and asks him not to worry. The girl says it's good. A guy with long blonde hair says he's unsure if they should talk to the soldiers about this, explaining that the situation is a bit tense right now. A man in camouflage explains that the soldiers gathered here are the senior officers of each unit, responsible for their subordinates, and explains. The man says he will then allow me to ask one question and explains why it took 3 days to organize this meeting. The man explains that they decided to give him time to rest, since the other person was always on his feet, and provided time for discussion of those who would like to raise issues at the meeting, and it was also necessary to select representatives. The guy says that they were busy with their squad's work. The man in the military uniform explains that they are not in the background, and the man with blonde hair shouts that for them they are in the background. The guy says that his interlocutor didn't have any extra time, and he explains that sometimes such cases happen. The man says that they are soldiers and are obliged to put people first, and asks if there could be anything more important than people. The woman remains silent. The man speaks, addressing Mr. Park Kwan-chan. A woman says she can't eat meat. The hooded man is silent, and the old man is also silent. Both are sweating. The man with short blonde hair screams. The woman explains that these are people who have found time for them in their busy schedules, and says that she understands the complaints and dissatisfaction, but thinks it's better for them to remain silent. The man replies that it's fine. The man is silent, and he says that the girl immediately put him in his place. The woman apologizes, explaining that Mr. Kwan-chan has a rather short temper. The man says they weren't responsive enough, but it's not because he's in a bad mood or anything like that. The girl says that she understands that in this situation they are doing everything possible for them, and says that she is Lee Sang-ah, and before this incident she had a small studio in the city. The man in the military uniform says he's glad they managed to get there safely. The guy is surprised. The man says that before starting a conversation, he asks the other person to explain how they ended up in their unit, and explains that in their situation, the best option would be to know each other's situation. The woman says of course. He says that we need to hold on. The man says that about 2 weeks ago, monsters suddenly appeared everywhere. The man explains that at that time all means of communication were cut off. The internet, television, cell phones, even radio communications were not working. The girl says that monsters began to attack from everywhere, and the people they attacked eventually turned into zombies, which caused great confusion. A man in a military uniform shouts that he can't believe it's true. A guy in dark clothes is surprised. The man in camouflage says he doesn't understand what the girl is talking about. The man in orange is surprised and asks what she's talking about. A man screams that it is a zombie. The guy in the blue jacket is silent, his arms crossed. The man in camouflage explains that they must act together. The man in camouflage with short hair says the situation requires decisive action. The man in camouflage with sharp features says they can't. The boy says that they and the other monsters could have been attacked by other creatures, and the man explains that their information and the others are completely inconsistent. Yun explains that this is unexpected. A woman asks a man if he has a problem with zombies, and the man expresses confusion. The guy in camouflage laughs and explains that they're just there. The man in blue looks at him with a disgruntled expression. The man explains that it's a zombie, and the girl says that it's a zombie and asks what they call them then. The man in camouflage says, well, this. Yun is surprised. A man in camouflage explains that these people are called walkers. A man in a gray hoodie asks what a walker is. The man in camouflage explains that it's not much, and the guy is surprised and says that he doesn't understand what other walkers they're talking about. The guy with the short hair says that there are a lot of people here who like dramas and he watched this drama too. And the guy with the dark hair explains that maybe they should call them walkers. The man says that now, after hearing the word zombie from his interlocutor, it will be more appropriate, and they will also call them that way. The girl says there will be zombies then. The man remains silent. Yun is surprised how they got away with it. The man asks to tell what happened next and asks to continue the story. They say that Lee Sang-a told everything and explained that they ran away from monsters and zombies with all their might. A man explains that survivors who met by chance joined forces to form this group. The man with green hair explains this to another man in a white shirt and tie, who listens and looks at him. A group of people crosses a river, some running, others walking. The story goes that while they were wandering around looking for safety, there's a military base on a mountain nearby. The guy with the beard says that one of the survivors told them about their unit. The man says it was him. The man is surprised and asks how they know about their base. The man says that a friend with whom he worked on the same construction site told him about this. He says he went to work at a military base that was located near the area where he lived, and explains that the base was located in a mountainous area. The man on the right explains that they didn't know the girl's exact location. The man says that they were still at a loss, there was nothing left to lose, and they barely made it. The man in the military uniform says they've been through a lot together, but the boy remains silent. The man says he has a question. Yong says he noticed they didn't have any weapons. No firearms, no bladed weapons, and not even a metal pipe in case of emergency. A woman explains that she has awakened superpowers, which may seem hard to believe. The man expresses surprise. The man in camouflage says he can't afford to relax because he has a family to look after, and another man in camouflage explains that he can't relax either, as he always has to be on guard. Yun explains that he certainly understands this. The woman says she is the only one awakened among them. The girl explains that it was thanks to this ability that they were able to break through the monsters. The guy says that she told everything openly, and then explains that he still doesn't believe that this is possible with only one awakened. The man says that his interlocutors probably won't believe it. The girl says she will allow him to demonstrate, and the man is surprised and asks if he is here. The man in the military uniform is silent, the guy in dark clothes is silent. The hand grips the handle of the knife. The girl explains that these are cutting scissors which are used for sewing, and that they are a little larger than regular scissors. Yun is surprised and says that she worked in a tailor shop and asks if she has skills in that field. The girl squeezes the scissors tightly and then sharply cuts the table with the scissors. The girl delivers a powerful blow with the knife downwards, cutting the surface. A girl with two pistols in her hands suddenly runs out between two tables. The girl says that everything is something like this. The man in camouflage says it's amazing and Yun is surprised. The girl says that she was working in the studio as usual when she was suddenly attacked by people who looked like zombies. The girl says she was stung, but quickly came to her senses and grabbed the scissors lying nearby. The girl says that while desperately swinging scissors, she accidentally hit a zombie in the head with them. The girl screams and explains that a window then appeared, saying that she had awakened her tailoring abilities. The girl explains that thanks to her abilities, she can cut off a zombie's head with just one move of a pair of scissors. Yeonjung is surprised that someone stuck scissors into his head and explains that there are different methods of awakening. The boy says that other people haven't fought the zombies and wonders if Miss Sun Ah was really the one protecting everyone. The girl explains that she's wondering the same thing and doesn't yet know the exact conditions for awakening. The boy remains silent. The man and another man, looking worried, explain that there are cases where a person doesn't wake up even after killing a monster. A man with long blonde hair explains that it's strange. A man with green hair and an older man listen. A man in dark clothing stands nearby. The man explains that Taejun said that there are those among them who can harm them and asks who the hell. The girl asks if there really is only one awakened person among them or if they are carefully hiding someone. The man says he thinks they were being told a story about awakening. The boy explains that he still doesn't know for sure why he woke up, and it seems like killing zombies gives you a random skill. The girl explains that she's felt the need to tell them all this time. The man says this is truly valuable information and thanks her for it. The woman explains that if the man has any problems, he can call them immediately, and they will definitely help him. The woman remains silent, and the man says he doesn't think someone like her would secretly wish them harm. Yeonjung remains silent. He says other survivors may pose a danger. The man explains that he will try to explain this to the soldiers of his unit and asks them not to worry about it. The girl says thank you. The man in camouflage tells Kwang Il to clear away the debris and orders the boys to go find another table. The man in the shadows replies, "Understood, Sergeant Lee." A man in a military uniform explains what to do in this case. The girl smiles, the man in the right corner smiles. The guy says that Lee Sang-ah told him about all kinds of monsters raging in the city and calls them zombies. The man explains that they don't know for sure what other species might appear in the future, and says it's a headache. The guy says they're done washing the dishes, Sergeant. The man is surprised. The woman explains that they have to pay for the food somehow and that they take turns helping, so everything is fine. The man says they worked hard and reminds them that they don't have to help him. The man says he has some snacks and offers to help himself. Yeonjung is surprised and says they're snacks. The woman remains silent. The voice explains that this is a reward for helping with washing dishes and cleaning. The girl says the ice cream is homemade. Yeonjun explains that he had some misutkaru left over, so he decided to make ice cream out of it so it wouldn't go to waste. He explains that it might taste different from store-bought ice cream, but he thinks it will be enjoyable. The woman thanks him for the treat. The guy asks his sister to take some too. The guy explains that this is a special misutkaru ice cream, filled with happiness and the chef's signature sauce. Yeonjun explains that it all starts with rumors that you can get snacks if you help out in the kitchen with cleaning. A guy is eating ice cream. A girl is eating ice cream. The girl on the right says the ice cream is delicious, while the girl on the left explains that it's sweet. The girl says she is not afraid. The girl is surprised that something so delicious can be made from misutkaru and asks her sister if she likes it. The woman explains that yes, it is delicious. The girl says she didn't expect this, but it's really delicious. A girl asks her sister if she just smiled, and her sister is surprised that it was about her. Yeonjung says the girl hasn't smiled since her mom and dad died, and explains that he suddenly felt lighter in his heart. The girl says she is so happy that her sister is smiling again. The woman says don't cry, and if the girl is happy, then why shed tears? The girl explains that she doesn't know, it's just that smile. The man remains silent. The woman explains that she didn't mean to offend, and the girl cries and says that it hurts her. He explains that after losing her parents, she probably suppressed all emotions. The man says that he acts like he knows everything, but his younger brother must have had a hard time too, and that the ice cream he gave them only had a temporary effect, but then everything went back to normal. The man explains that the changes resulting from the transformation of consciousness remain even after the effect ends, and reveals that Kwang Il no longer succumbs to fear after eating the dish that made him brave. The man says the ice cream definitely works and explains that the hunt can now begin. The girl holds the ice cream. The evening after the meeting ended. The man in camouflage says he found out about the guy who asked Yeonjun about his specialty, and first found out which room he was in. Yeonjun tells him to continue. The man says there are 5 people living in that room and explains that he thinks they knew each other before the apocalypse happened. The man is surprised and then explains that being close to people doesn't make them accomplices. A man with long blonde hair says that, on the other hand, all 5 could pose a danger. The man says they can't just go and grab them because they have no evidence and they're acting quiet compared to everyone else, and the man asks what to do now. The man says that everything will be fine until the survivors start to rebel, and explains that if the survivors rebel, there is a chance that they will overwhelm them with numbers. The man says that simply waiting until danger comes is not an option, and the other man explains that if these people wake up, they will be more dangerous than they think. The man explains that if he can make them snacks and get them to confess their plans, then The guy asks if the survivors at the meeting agreed to help with the work. Yeonjun says he'll accept their help, but for now it'll be limited to cleaning the dorm and kitchen. The guy is surprised and then says he thinks there is a way. The man asks which one and explains that he needs to assign the person he chooses to the kitchen, and then asks what he should do next. The man is surprised and says that it is the same as with Kwang Il or Lieutenant Kim. The man says that if a guy is confident in himself, he should act, and the guy explains that the plan works. The man in camouflage says that it's not that easy and asks Yeonjun if he has any other abilities besides buffs. The guy is surprised and says that he was caught. The man says he doesn't understand what this ability is, but he's sure this situation will require more strength, yet he trusts his interlocutor. He explains that relying too heavily on this ability will lead to nothing good. Yeonjung explains that he'll therefore be more careful. The guy says he's sure Hyun will figure it out. The man remains silent. He says that if his ability were known, no one would want to eat his cooking, and that when it is needed, he must use it to the fullest, but at the same time be careful not to get caught. He says that then they will decide on the day, and the other man says that it's good. The guy says there was more work than he thought. The man asks if he is finished yet. The man explains that he was previously a reserve soldier, so it's just a trifle, and Yeonjung explains that he worked hard. A man offers to have a snack before going out, and the man is surprised. The man says this is the most famous ice cream. The guy says it's the one and explains that he's jealous of people who haven't tried it because everyone who helped in the kitchen brags about how delicious it is. The guy explains that he is ashamed in front of the other people in the dorm, and the man says that it's okay because they still come to help in turns, and sooner or later everyone will come here and try it. The man says it's so unusual and delicious, and now he understands the reactions of others. Yeonjun says that's true. The guy says he tried very hard to make the dish so that even an elephant could understand that it would be very tasty. He says that since what they are eating is a special dish, he did not skimp on the ingredients. The voice explains that this is the chef's special misutkaru ice cream, filled with happiness. The man says he really liked it and it was so delicious, and the guy explains that words can't describe how amazing it is. The guy says he's glad she liked it. The guy asks if he can ask him something and if he'll be okay with it. The man replies that, of course, he can ask any question, and he'll be happy to answer it. Yeonjung says that last time he was asked about his specialization, the man says yes and asks why. The man explains that they needed to check if there were any awakened people in the squad, and says that if this is a military base with a lot of weapons, then it would not be surprising if there were people who managed to awaken, like the leader of their group, so they would have to change their entire tactics. The man says they heard it wasn't like that, so everything will go smoothly, and then expresses surprise at his own words. The man says that's it, and explains that he doesn't want to talk about it because it just happens. The man is surprised that his mouth opens on its own and says everything. He explains what he would do if there were awakened ones in their unit. He explains that they would first need to check the scale. If there were a lot of awakened ones in the squad, their chances of victory would be very slim, and adds that they would probably quietly wait for a convenient moment. The man explains that they couldn't find any signs of escape on the soldiers, so they calmed down and even relaxed, and the guy says that they are not the only ones who are afraid of other awakened ones. The man says that this is true and screams that what is happening to him. The guy curses and says that if he stays, there will be problems. The man says he has a couple more questions and asks to slow down a bit. The guy shouts. The man is surprised that he can't refuse him and explains that they should ask. The boy asks how many awakened people are in their group and asks about the leader. The man explains that all 5 of them, living in the same room, have recently awakened, and the leader is Park Kwan-chan. The guy is surprised that all 5 people are against him. The man says Lieutenant Kim may have been wondering why he didn't show up. The girl remains silent. The man wonders what the 5 were planning. The man explains that he's in deep trouble. Yun-young explains that they were trying to take over the unit and first checked for any awakened or other threats. The man says that after several days of observation, a man in a military uniform explains that there are no awakened or other dangerous individuals in this unit. A man in a hoodie explains that they've decided to conduct an operation. The man says that tonight. The guy is surprised and says it's tonight. The guy says they'll start as soon as he gets back to the guys and laughs, confirming this. The man says this cannot be allowed to happen. The man explains that due to recent events. The guy says he'll have to start right now. The hooded man is surrounded by fire and screams, and Yun-jun reacts with surprise. The guy is screaming. The guy says he can't breathe. The man explains that he was at first confused when his tongue was loosened, but then he realized that it was even better this way, and says that he is just a cook who is not capable of fighting. The man says he didn't expect it and didn't think the attack would be so sudden. The man says that today is clearly not his day. The man is surrounded by fire and says that it's still bad that the other one found out about his ability, so he will just kill him and start the operation a little earlier. A man throws a fireball. A man notices an approaching fireball and prepares to defend himself. The man says not to underestimate the chef and explains that he is on first-name terms with fire. The man explains that a high fire resistance effect is applied, and cooking pizza is always accompanied by flames, and holding and swinging a steel pan over a burning flame is the chef's job. The man extends his hands toward the fire. The man interacts with the flames. The guy shouts that the other guy has chosen the wrong person. He stands in a fighting stance, surrounded by fire and a vortex of energy. Flames engulf the room. The flame moves forward quickly. The man shouts that it's impossible for someone else to block the flames with their bare hands and asks what kind of nonsense this is. Yun-young stands in the center of the whirlpool, surrounded by flames. The guy says phew and explains that now he doesn't have to hide. Yun-jun says that this is his true ability. The man says the target has poor culinary skills and an understanding of primate care techniques. The man tells you to get ready because it's about to get really hot, and at the same time he stabs you with a knife. The man shouts that he doesn't believe what he heard. The man says he can't afford to relax. Yun-jong strikes with his sword, and the other man is surrounded by fire and screams. Yun-jong continues his attack, creating lines of light. The man asks why he's been gone for so long and what they should do now, turning to Hyun-nim. Hyun-nim laughs. The man with short blonde hair says that won't do and suggests they proceed without him. The man with dark hair explains that Yun-jun will join them later. The guy with the short hair asks if they can handle it without him. The man with the beard says they can. The man shouts that even without him there are 4 awakened ones here, and explains that they personally verified that there are no such people among the soldiers. The guy with the short haircut says they don't know for sure yet. The man in the military uniform explains this with a smile. Yun-jun explains that they might have missed something. The man explains that Chong-jun has already reached level 6 and is the favorite among them, and also explains that the way he senses his element and uses the skill is a very unique phenomenon. The man explains that he is the leader here, but he really doesn't like waiting. The man says that they are leaving for surgery immediately and explains that Chong-jun will join them later. The other man agrees. The man shouts to hurry and explains that they will have to get everyone out of the dorm. A guy shouts that people were dragged out into the street in the middle of the night and asks what all the fuss is about. The man explains that they're acting weird. A girl asks a man, Park Kwan-chan, why he did all this. The man explains that he has a chronic illness, and if he doesn't become a leader, he'll get hives. The girl screams that she wants to know what they are talking about. The woman says that from the very beginning he was especially harsh and cruel to others. The man explains this by expressing anger, and the other man looks frightened. The man says that before him, as if he were awakened, he behaved as quiet as a mouse and a grass. The girl stands with her hands on her hips and listens. The girl says she assumes the man isn't happy with being the leader of his group. The man explains that he doesn't feel like there's enough room for their group. The man explains that they simply need territory for expansion. The man says that, for example, this base will, in principle, be enough for the first time. The man says he's not afraid. The girl says they're crazy. The guy asks if they fight. The woman explains that, in her opinion, yes, they have everything here, but they don't like it. The girl shouts that she didn't like these grumpy guys from the very beginning. The man asks what the survivors did there. The man explains that they don't understand yet either, and the other man says that the crowd suddenly descended and started arguing among themselves, and that they tried to stop them, but they told them not to interfere, since it was none of their business. The man says to continue watching. The man says he will go and tell the others about it. The man says he knew some kind of incident would happen one day. The girl says that, as she expected, the man left her no choice. The girl says that she didn't want to use it just like that, however. The boy is surprised. The man says that Mrs. Sun took out scissors. The woman hugs the boy. The man says he is scared and he knows the power of these scissors because he has already seen them in action. The girl is silent. The man says that he will not change his mind even when he is on the verge of death and calls it a psycho, and then explains that the person he is talking about probably thinks that he can defeat him alone. The girl is surprised and says that they need to stop because they are doing something. The man tells Hyun-nim to leave it to him and explains that he will easily break her scissors. The man explains that the girl is strong and invites the third to join. The man says yes, Hyun-nim. The girl with the knives screams. The man in the brown jacket explains that she knows her abilities, but she's still not so sure of their strength. The man in the gray shirt and the man in the blue shirt remain silent. The girl asks if they hid their awakening from others. The man with long blonde hair laughs and says it's only just dawned on him, while the other man explains that it would be better to demonstrate his abilities in practice. The man with the tail is surprised. The man in the brown shirt says they are awakened. The girl smiles. The man says that Ms. Sun is not going to retreat and orders an attack. The man says we understand, Hyung-nim, and clenches his fist, which becomes cracked, while the other man releases golden spheres into the air. The girl is surprised and says that there are people behind her. The woman says she needs to change the location of the battle first. Then she jumps down with a knife in her hand. The man lunges at her, creating a whirlwind around himself. The woman is surprised. A guy screams as his fist collides with another fist. The sound of metal colliding is heard. The guy runs forward sharply, creating a whirlwind of energy around himself. The girl quickly moves towards him. The girl is surprised when golden balls start flying around her. The girl screams and delivers a series of rapid blows, surrounded by glowing lines and golden shards. The guy shouts that they are different from zombies and curses. A man with golden balls around his hands says that there are two awakened at once and asks if he has a chance. The boy says he can't believe what's happening. The man explains that he needs to stay calm. The woman says she's afraid for the child and asks him not to let go. The man says that it seems that the girl who has only been in the way all this time will soon be finished off. The man strikes, the girl dodges and says that she fought zombies and her fighting skills must be at their best. The man shouts that it's time to stop messing around and get his act together. The girl is surprised that she hasn't practiced much and explains that she needs to take advantage of the window in her attacks. The girl screams and delivers a series of blows accompanied by bursts of energy, while the man prepares to attack. The man shouts that he is fed up and orders people to surrender. The guy says they've almost reached level 4 already. The man says he will never lose to a girl who doesn't even have fighting skills. A loud bang is heard. The boy screams that he can't let himself die, and the man screams that he won't give up. The girl is surprised that he didn't answer her question and says that she can't understand why he did that. The man screams that he doesn't believe his ears. A hand in a military uniform raises a rifle upwards, smoke rising from the barrel. The hand grips the butt of the gun. The guy yells that they raised their hands and are not moving, and asks what they are doing here. 6 soldiers stand with their weapons at the ready. A man with bandaged hands prepares for battle, and a girl with a knife in her hand takes a fighting stance. Another man raises his hands, trying to stop the conflict. The guy says he shouldn't do that, and the girl explains that she can't let them go. The guy with green hair says he can't afford to die, and the man explains he's not going to die. The soldiers aim their guns and demand that they raise their hands, and the man asks what will happen if they don't stop. The guy shouts that he will make a sieve out of someone else. The man laughs and says the soldier is going to shoot civilians. The boy is surprised, asking if this means he'll shoot these survivors too. The man remains silent. The woman hugs the child. The man explains that there is a state of emergency now, and if they turn out to be enemies, they will start shooting. The man asks if this guy is the ringleader. The man says that there is definitely more than one awakened person among them. The man says that he thinks it's just more convenient for them to consider them enemies, and explains that it's understandable that they will defend themselves. The man says they are going to go against soldiers who have weapons. The man says that the awakened are definitely strong, but not to the point of defeating weapons. The man says there's no need to hesitate, there's an enemy in front of him, and calls for shooting. The man in military uniform gives the order from the front. The man says the 20-year-old is not capable of more. The boy screams. The man says he seems to have lost his mind, and the boy asks Corporal Seo Soo-hyuk what to do next. The guy says he's irritated. The man with the gun says he gave a clear warning. A man in camouflage says he was about to shoot another man. A man with long hair explains that he probably jumped the gun, calling him a minor. The man is surprised and says that the gun doesn't work. The man says it's not broken. Park Kwan-chan says it's just his ability. It's explained that Park Kwan-chan is an awakened pyro specialization level 5. He has 12 strength, 8 agility, 10 magic, 4 luck. Talents include minor physical resistance. Minor. The man says it's his skill and wonders how strong he is if he can stop the bullets from firing. Another man says their guns don't fire either. The guy explains that he can interfere with the flames. The image shows a flying bullet. The man explains that a rifle is also a firearm and suggests not to try incendiary bullets because any explosions or fires are useless against it. The man explains that he wouldn't take such a risk in front of so many soldiers with guns drawn and that they had let their guard down. The man says that it's as expected from their hyungnim, and the guy explains that their weapons are useless. The girl explains that at this rate the unit will end up in their hands. He says it's his turn to command and orders them to quickly kneel, warning that if they're good, they might take pity on them. He then explains that from now on, he's taking charge of the unit and asks if everyone understands. The man explains that all this time the other guy was just trying to scare him with this thing, and he thought that he really had enough courage, but in reality he was just scared for no reason. The boy asks Corporal So what they should do now. Corporal So explains that there are only 4 of them and suggests leaving 1 soldier for each to make things more fair. The guy says that they should take care of the group of survivors first, and the other guy explains that they need to send a few people to help them, after which the first guy confirms this. The man shouts that the soldiers' stupid heads haven't grasped the situation they're in, and explains that it's impossible for ordinary people to defeat the awakened, urging them to stop being stupid and finally give up. The man says he's tired of yelling and leaves Han Il and Day One to do it. The man says yes and clasps his hands. The guy smiles. The man says he has no choice but to kill. The man says he'll start with a confident boy. A man screams and punches another man who is surrounded by purple flames, and he is surprised. The man screams and attacks sharply, and Yunjun dodges and strikes back. A man in military uniform stands and looks at 2 men lying on the ground, one in military uniform with smoke coming from his body, and the other in casual clothes. A group of armed men watches the scene. The girl says that she is not going to give up and will fight until the end. The man says he just started and his opponent is already unconscious and calls him a weakling. A man in military uniform says he doesn't understand what they were thinking. The man says he can't die because he has a debt. The guy on the right explains that they just got really strong. The guy on the left laughs. The guy in the background smiles. The man says that the situation is under control and there is no need to worry, asks if there are any wounded, and asks if everything is okay to go to their rooms. A man orders 2 people to be taken to a designated location. Another man confirms the order. The guy asks Soo-hyuk what happened here. Soo-hyuk explains that he and Kwang-il were on patrol, but quickly returned after hearing gunfire. The man says it was Sergeant Lee. The guy says that, as far as he heard, there was a fight between the survivors, and explains that a group of smart guys decided to start a riot. He asks a question. The man says that besides Ms. Lee Sang-ah, there were 5 more awakened ones in the camp who not only deceived them, but also tried to take control of the unit by force, but after they were punched in the face once, they immediately calmed down. The man is surprised, and another man says that the guy seemed suspicious to him even then. The voice explains that Yun-young was right and the 4 wanted to seize power, not knowing that they had been aware of their plan for a long time. The guy says there's 1 missing, and the man explains that it's him. The man says it's Sergeant Shin Young-jun, and the other man is surprised. The guy screams that he's tired, and the man screams. The guy carries the man on his shoulders. The guy asks if everything is sorted out. The man says that Yun-jun did a good job. The guy asks what's wrong with him, and the man in camouflage explains that he looks so. The man says his fighting skills only get stronger over time and explains that he is unconscious. The man shouts that Jae-chan-jun was the strongest among them. The man screams that it is a curse. The guy in camouflage says that this is too much, and Yun-jun explains that he was already trying to be as gentle as possible. He explains that any cooking begins with preparing the ingredients, for example, by cutting the trachea and draining the blood of a fish, and yet the fatality rate remains very high. In the bottom panel, he fights an opponent, striking, surrounded by fire and light. The man explains that fish are often stunned, so they don't get in the way when cutting, and suggests trying a different cooking method. The guy strikes. The guy says he feels like the strongest of them is actually the weakest. The man explains that it seems that way because of the difference in levels. The guy on the right says that these guys look like they're only level 3, and the guy on the left is surprised how that is. The man explains that there are about 5 level 6s in their unit, not counting other subordinates, and asks Sergeant Shin Young-jun if he's on the verge of level 10. Sergeant Shin Young-jun confirms this. The man explains that the group shouldn't be forgotten either. The guy is surprised and says that it is a group skill token. Yun-jong explains that the item helps level up in the early stages and is very useful, allowing you to instantly reach level 5 from level 1. The man explains that he's useless in the later stages. The man says that they've done a good job anyway and can now cope without him. The man explains that they couldn't have achieved this without his help. The man in camouflage speaks precisely, and Yun-jun explains that they have come this far only thanks to his talent for cooking special food and asks if he should be called the squad mother. The voice says it's a little. The girl says that men, too, it turns out, are awakened. The man asks if Miss Sun-a is okay, and she explains that thanks to the doctors, she feels fine. The guy says it's good that they were so surprised. The girl explains that it is true and thanks him for his protection, explaining that without him they would have been in big trouble. The guy explains that they had no choice but to keep it a secret until they found out the true intentions and identity of the interlocutor. The girl says that she understands and explains that the whole squad will be. The man says that only half of them, and he explains that there are about 50 people. The man is silent. He thinks it would be best to tell her everything. The man says that his awakened specialty is seamstress, and confirms this. He says that he is a cook and the other guys have other, but no less useful specializations. The guy asks if this is Sergeant Shin and wonders if everything is okay. The man in camouflage says he thought he would immediately want to run away, while the other man explains that he is being quiet and may have resigned himself to the situation. The man says okay and asks where the room with their youngest is, and the other man explains that it is at the end of the hallway. The guy asks how to begin the interrogation, and the man explains that he will go alone and offers to help. The guy says you can rely on him. The man opens the door and says he is greeting Mr. Chong-jun. The man shouts that he just came to talk and explains that if they don't attack first, he won't attack them either. The man says it's good. The guy explains that the reason for his visit is to ask a few questions and asks if he will listen to him. The man shouts that he agrees to answer any questions and asks to be left alive. The guy is silent and then says that he has flashbacks and that he may have overdone it. The man says that if you listen to him carefully, he promises not to hit you. Jun smiles and offers the man some ice cream. The man says the effect of truth ice cream is amazing and people become so open. The man says he and his comrades were criminals and their hideout was near Gangwon-do. A man explains that once survivors began hearing about cases of ability awakening, dealing with the situation became much more difficult. A man with long blonde hair tells a group of men. The boy explains that, hiding the fact that they are awakened, he and his friends joined Miss Sun Os group. The man explains that they were never able to seize power in the camp. One of them has the ability to tell lies that are indistinguishable from the truth. He has already convinced people to rebel more than once, but this time it didn't work out. The man says that these guys have pulled together quite well. A man asks if they're after his unit. Another man explains that if you're going to seize power, you should go with the most influential one. He explains that they had weapons, so they thought they'd hit the jackpot, and a firearm would be a good argument for future actions. The guy explains that he now fully understands Taeyong's prophecy about hiding abilities, and says that if they knew what abilities they had. The guy explains that they probably wouldn't have acted so rashly and would have changed their approach. The man explains that he should have thought carefully before letting the survivors in. The guy screams and then says what to do with them now. The man says he went out to calm the survivors as Jun ordered. A man asks if something is wrong, and another man explains that some people were very worried, but he tried to calm them down, explaining that he was tongue-tied. He continued to coax them, and eventually they calmed down and began to disperse to their rooms. The guy says that the officer's words sound more convincing than those of a private, and explains that this is exactly the kind of situation he is needed for. The man in camouflage says that he did a good job and did everything that Jun told him to do, and Jun thanks him for his work. The man says he's done a good job and asks if the other person could make him something like a late-night snack as a reward for his work. The guy says his addiction symptoms are getting worse. The man in camouflage says he was joking and apologizes if it was too much, and Jun explains that 3 meals a day is more than enough for him. The guy says it's okay. Since they've solved the problem, he'll cook for them. The man thanks Jun and promises to work even harder. The girl says that she is very interested in what dish he will cook. He says to go to the dining room and he will bring the food when it is cooked. The guy happily jumps on the spot and sings. The guy explains that he has already eaten today, and the man happily leaves, humming. The guy says he can also turn those 5 dogs into his own. The dark-haired guy says he'll still have to feed them and explains he can't kill them because they're human. The man explains that this is food for prisoners and that it consists of rice, vegetables, and meat. The image shows a close-up of a mouth being placed on a spoon with rice. The guy says he's already eaten today and smiles, while the man with long hair leans over the tray and cries. A man speaks with a smile, holding food on chopsticks. A man with closed eyes and tears on his face explains that he's crying from happiness. A man with swollen cheeks and tears on his face explains that the food is delicious. A man with a bandage on his head eats from a tray. The award was the title. The man explains that his title is Chef of Edification, and explains that the effect of cooking food that targets monsters and professions with evil properties is increased by 30%. The guy in camouflage says he can't afford to be weak because he's a soldier. The guy in the blue jacket replies that he's not going to give up and will fight to the end. The other men watch the conversation silently. The man explains that he will wash the dishes, and Jun explains that he will sweep the floor. A man asks how the newcomers are doing. The man in camouflage says they are adapting well, and although they are older than him, this does not make them professionals, but he thinks they will get used to it. The guy says he's glad it all ended on a good note. The man in camouflage says he definitely wouldn't trade his interlocutor for anyone else, and the guy agrees. The voice says it was looking for Jun. The guy is surprised. The man in camouflage asks why. A man in a military uniform says there is a problem and they need him. Jun asks what the problem is. The man says that it is. The guy says they tried to collect as much oil as they could from the tanks, but that's all they have, and the man explains that without taking the engine oil into account, the generator will last for about another week, no more. The man in camouflage says that resources were already limited, but the number of people consuming them has doubled, and Yun explains that they are developing, but their food and energy are not increasing. The man explains that all plans went awry due to the addition of survivors. The man says they won't be able to hold out for long. The man asks what now. Yun remains silent. The guy says he told him to come without dinner. The man in uniform explains that preparing such a dish in the army is a true art. The boy says it's nothing and wishes to eat to his heart's content. The man reminds them that he himself said the supplies were running low and explains that if they eat everything, the others will starve. The man explains that it is actually lizard meat. A man takes a piece of food with chopsticks. The guy on the top right says he can't eat it, and the guy on the top left explains that it's delicious. The man on the bottom right says it's meat, and the man on the bottom left says it's delicious. The guy shouts that he is Sergeant Shin and asks what. The guy in camouflage yells that he doesn't understand why Yun is cooking with a lizard, and the other guy in camouflage explains that he knows Yun had his reasons for doing so and asks him to just tell him why. The guy on the left is silent, the guy on the right speaks with tension. Yun explains that they have only fought lizards before and considers this their main disadvantage. The man says that they recently learned from Ms. Sun about the existence of other monsters, such as zombies and even people. The guy explains that they need to be more prepared. The guy says their supply of dry rations is almost completely exhausted. The man says that it turns out that lizard meat is the best option. The guy says he understands what the other guy means, but that a lot of people probably won't like it and asks if the guys are right. The man says he knows how monsters are treated and explains that he knows their meat is edible. The man says that the dish is delicious to prepare, but since those who will eat it saw how these creatures tore apart the bodies of their comrades. Then, Yun remains silent and then says that he understands them perfectly. The voice explains that only by controlling one's mental state can one prepare a special dish. The man explains that if he didn't control himself, he would have gone mad long ago, adding that he's always on the edge. Then a monster appears, having recently eaten people and now intending to eat them again. The voice says that. The man with red hair explains that their initial goal is to survive at all costs. The man with black hair remains silent. The man says they need to make a decision and asks if they want to be caught and eaten by a monster. The guy explains that he needs to survive by eating this monster. The man in camouflage tells them to eat as much as they want. The man in camouflage explains that this is a corporate dinner that Yun has prepared for everyone. A guy says he's just tired of dry rations, and another guy explains that it's a holiday. The man asks if they say it's lizard meat. The man says the food tastes better than he thought and explains that besides tasting delicious, it also improves their performance. The guy explains that it's not even close to the dishes he's tried before, and the man eats the shashlik. The other men eat it too and show approval. The guy in camouflage says they didn't even need any convincing, and Yun explains that their reaction was surprisingly good. The man says some people were a little apprehensive, but then, the men laugh and chat at the food table. The man in camouflage says that everyone has come to a unanimous agreement and it may take some time, but they will soon get used to it, and Yun replies, yeah. The guy says he doesn't even mind hiding soda and beer for them, and asks what kind of corporate dinner would be without booze. The man explains that they have hidden alcohol, too. The guy with his hands up says he couldn't have disappeared from the warehouses on his own, and the other soldiers support him. The man says that beer was delivered today. Rare brand drink standing on a surface, with one bottle falling from above. The dark-haired man says it's going to be fun tonight and raises his glass to celebrate. The short-haired man shouts that they're all in this together and raises his glass. The other men raise their glasses and smile. The dark-haired man raises his glass and the man says he hasn't seen them this happy in a long time and explains that he thinks they deserve it. Yun says that he has already eaten today. The girl asks if this is Mrs. Lee saying The guy asks if they wanted something, and the girl explains that she was looking for members of the unit in the dormitory. But there was no one there. Then she heard a noise and went towards the sound. The guy is silent. The girl is surprised. The guy explains that they had a reason. The man explains that he doesn't think the group will be better off if its members know what they're doing here, and explains that she probably thinks they only care about their own squad members while the survivors of her squad are being neglected and ignored. The guy explains that it might seem weird, but the girl understands that he is talking about monster meat and says that no, it is not weird. The girl explains that this is simply necessary for survival, and adds that they are also indebted to them. Yunjun says the survivors must be feeling uncomfortable too. He says that he has a request for them, and the girl explains that it is true. The girl asks for official permission to join the squad. The man is surprised. The hooded man shouts that he is surprised. The guy is surprised and says that they also want to participate in the battle with the monsters. The woman says that, of course, it is good to be under the protection of soldiers, but if they do not fight for their survival, they will sooner or later die due to helplessness. The guy says she knows they can't protect them forever and notes that she thinks like a leader. The woman says it was a bit unexpected and that she's been thinking about it ever since Mr. Quan Chan and his gang betrayed them. The man asks, is that how it happened? Yun Yung says that if they hadn't been nearby, she wouldn't have been able to stop them. The man with purple eyes and blonde hair explains that she's incredibly lucky. The man explains that they came to this conclusion after lengthy negotiations, and the conclusion is this: they need the strength to survive on their own. The girl asks if they've heard from other survivors. The man is surprised by the determination and explains that each soldier in the unit has a rank, and being with them means obeying orders just like other members of the unit do. The uniform with a camouflage pattern has a black rectangular chevron without inscriptions or symbols. The girl says there is no need to worry about it and explains that Lieutenant Kim seems to be a good leader, so she does not think that any serious problems could arise in their squad.